Chapter 16:28. In the grotto, Baiji was kneeling on the ground with a gauze in her hand. She was carefully wiping Meaty's face. Her eyes were devout and respectful. She didn't dare to overdo it, as if she was afraid of waking up the sleeping lord. For the past 5 years, she had been like this every day. Baiji's respect for Meaty hadn't been reduced because she had been asleep for a long time. After finishing, she carefully cleaned the gauze and knelt on the ground. "This servant has offended you. Please don't blame me." A light cough came from behind, followed by a few gasps. "The madam's soul is gone and she can't wake up. What you did was really unnecessary." Baiji's face was expressionless. She didn't change at all. She turned around and looked at him with cold eyes. "It seems you are really going to die." Go Sheng raised an eyebrow and wiped his nose and mouth. "How do you know?" "Baiji said you talk too much." Go Sheng was silent for a moment. Then he said with emotion, "I didn't expect you to be so smart. But since you are so smart, how can you not notice the madam's disgust for you?" Baiji's eyes were cold. The temperature in the air crazily dropped, and a trace of cold and fierce aura slowly emerged. Go Sheng's mouth curved up. "What? Did I poke a sore spot and you want to turn against me?" He sat up straight with his arms on the ground and patted his chest. "Come, don't be polite. Stab me with your sword. If I dodge, I will be your son." Baiji's eyes became colder. "You are really going to die." Go Sheng curled his lips. "You said this 2 years ago, but even today I am still panting with you. Do you think it's interesting?" Baiji said, "2 years ago you could still use 2 swords, but now you can only use 1 more sword." She paused for a moment and then continued, "This time you will die." Go Sheng clapped his hands and exclaimed in admiration, that's right. But my last sword will definitely drag you down with me. Do you believe me?" Baiji slowly nodded. The coldness in her body disappeared. She sat back on the ground and closed her eyes. She didn't speak, but the meaning in her eyes was very clear. "Because of this, you can live to this day." Under normal circumstances, the 2 of them would fall into silence after their daily battle until Baiji wiped Little Flesh's face the next day. But today, Go Sheng felt that he still wanted to say a few more words. He frowned and said, "Hey Baiji, aren't you curious why I can still have such a terrifying sword when I'm only left with a little bit of life? Even you are not willing to touch it." Baiji opened her eyes. "If I ask, will you tell me?" Go Sheng nodded. "Yes." "Then tell me." Go Sheng rubbed his chin. "Your attitude is a little too insincere, but forget it. I don't care about my attitude when I want to say something." He raised his hand and pointed at himself. "Look at me. Yes, look at me. Have you realized that I'm a sword?" Goli was smiling. This was the 3rd generation of the Li family who had his sword dao severed. He had to endure endless pain and suffering every day, but he never revealed any of it. Even if he knelt down and became a dog, he could still maintain his calm. But now, for the first time, some emotions rose from the bottom of his heart. He pointed again and again, easily poking holes in the ground. His smile grew brighter. "Look, this is the proof." Baiji frowned slightly. He stared at Go Sheng with surprise in his eyes, but there was also a hint of burning desire in his eyes. "Do you understand?" Go Sheng laughed. "Don't you find it strange that there is a freak like me in this world? In fact, it's very simple. My parents are the strongest sword cultivators in this world. They only have swords in their hearts. They don't have the concept of blood affinity. The reason why they chose to give birth was that they hoped to give birth to a good sword embryo through this method. But later, they discovered that there was a small problem with this idea. If they insisted on continuing, one of them would have to die. Neither of my parents wanted to die, so they abandoned me without hesitation and returned to the mountains to continue their cultivation. That's why I survived and was given the title of Sword Immortal by the Li family. TSK, don't you think it's funny? Laugh if you want, because I also feel that my life in this world is indeed a joke." Baiji was expressionless. She thought for a moment and said slowly, "Tell me all this and let me see through your nature. What do you want?" After saying so much in one breath, Go Sheng was a little exhausted. His extremely pale face showed an abnormal redness. He took a few breaths and said with a smile, "I can promise you, but I will guard the sword intent in my main body until the end of my life. I will not let it leak out even a little bit. With my corpse, you can forge a sword that is perfect for you. Not only will it solve your flaws, but it will also improve your strength. I think you won't doubt this. After all, this should be our madam's original idea." Baiji said, "What do I want to do?" Go Sheng raised 2 fingers. Baiji frowned. Go Sheng smiled and shook his head. "Baiji, you have to be patient. Let me finish, okay? First, before I die, you are not allowed to do anything to Marquis Zhongwu. I want you to swear on your sword heart. Even if I pass out one day, it will still be effective. Second, refine my corpse into a sword. If there is a chance in the future, go to the Li family in the Central Province. Don't stare, I won't let you avenge me. That is no different from asking you to kill yourself. Find my parents and show them the sword. Tell them that I am very grateful to their ancestors for allowing me to live and appear in this world." Baiji pondered and said nothing. Go Sheng sneered, "Don't be discontented. My conditions are already very fair. The first thing is just a start, and the rest is just a meeting. I didn't set a time limit. You can wait until you have enough confidence before doing it." He narrowed his eyes. "Otherwise, before I die, I will cut out this sword in my body and let you watch as a peerless sword is destroyed." Baiji nodded. "Okay." She raised her hand and swore on her sword heart. She was straightforward and didn't play any tricks. Go Sheng smiled and nodded. He lay back and fell into a deep sleep. Baiji could immediately see that he had reached his limit. In his deep sleep, he could die at any moment. Had he been tricked? It couldn't be considered that. If she didn't agree, then Go Sheng really would cut out that sword, and it was likely that the sword edge would be aimed at her. She looked at the unconscious Go Sheng and then at the loyal Marquis Ningqin. Then she closed her eyes and began to meditate. It was just a bit of time. She would just have to wait. The darkness was even colder. Qin Yu had no choice but to sit down cross-legged and revolve his soul force with all his strength. Only then was he just barely able to resist. But if so, the rate at which his soul passed away would be much faster. In other words, in this state, the amount of time Qin Yu could last would be greatly reduced. The 2 trees beside Little Meaty continued to move forwards, but their speed was much slower. Qin Yu could clearly feel the fear they emitted. It was like in the unknown darkness ahead. There was some strength suppressing them. Calculating the time, another 4 hours passed. A layer of frost began to form on the branches of the 2 trees. Soon it thickened and solidified into ice crystals, as if they were wearing clothes made of ice. Peepa, peepa, the branches began to crack apart, turning into ice powder that fell to the ground. The speed at which the 2 trees moved forwards had slowed to the extreme. They were barely moving forwards, 1 step at a time. Qin Yu opened his eyes and let out a long breath. For them to persist until here and endure the fear and cold, they were already loyal and devoted to him. If they continued forwards, even if they could persist, these 2 trees would likely suffer irreparable damage. As the saying went, appearance came from the heart. Although this cold came from the heart, as long as you believed it, it truly existed. This wasn't to say that you could ignore it if you didn't believe it, but that as long as you stepped within a certain range, you would unconsciously and instinctively believe this. Only those with a boundary that surpassed the boundaries could break through the void and see the truth. Only then could you achieve the state of being impervious to all techniques as long as your heart didn't believe it. The 2 trees couldn't accomplish this, and neither could Qin Yu. But it was unknown whether it was because Little Meaty had helped him stabilize his soul, or whether it was because he was a man holding a sun in his hand, but he was still able to persist. Of course, even if he could persist, he would still feel the icy cold. The surface of his soul was covered in a thick layer of white frost. It melted, and then reappeared. After repeating this several times, the result was that Qin Yu's entire body was wet. The taste of this extreme cold was truly refreshing. Qin Yu tried to dispel the moisture around him, but it came from the cold and seemed to possess some sort of immortal attribute. All sorts of methods were useless against it. Now he decided not to waste any more energy and just let it be. Stop. You all wait here and don't go any further. Qin Yu stood up and let out a breath of cold air. He rubbed his hands together and turned to look at little Meaty. She was sleeping soundly like before, and the chill in the dark didn't disturb her at all. This left Qin Yu envious. At the same time, he bitterly smiled and felt fear deep in his heart. In the past, he had lost his mind and followed little Meaty home. But now that he was facing a true life or death trial, he began to panic a little. If he failed, he would really be finished. If he were to be locked here, his soul would wither away and die. He rubbed between his eyebrows and flicked his sleeves. His feet moved and he floated forwards. This was also one of the most mysterious aspects of this world of darkness. It didn't have any substance, and a person could naturally float in the air. They could move up and down, left and right, and they could reach places with just a thought. It was like a person in water. Hiss! It was impossible to think about it. As soon as the word water was mentioned, he suddenly felt even colder. This was a similar feeling that Qin Yu had experienced in the past when he passed through the icy sea in the depths of the dark abyss and returned to the vast Yang world. But today, in terms of cultivation, Qin Yu was over 100 times stronger than he was back then. From this, it could be seen just how terrifying the extreme cold in this world of darkness was. Chapter 16:29. As he walked forwards, Qin Yu held onto a branch that was wet from his clothes and wet from his wet clothes. From time to time, an extremely dim green light would flash across its surface, guiding Qin Yu in the right direction. Otherwise, it would be very easy for one to get lost in the endless darkness without any coordinates and see nothing but a vast expanse. At this time, Qin Yu had already been walking alone for an hour. The chill in the darkness had risen by 30% compared to when they parted ways. This was already terrifying. The heat released by his soul was no longer able to melt the white frost in time. Thus, the water began to freeze. As Qin Yu moved forwards, every step he took emitted cracking sounds. The thin layer of ice covering his body was breaking apart. But at the same time, Qin Yu felt an excruciating pain as if his flesh and bones were breaking apart. This feeling was hard to describe. The green light on the surface of the branch became much darker, and the frequency at which it flashed was much slower than before. Frowning, Qin Yu lifted his hand and placed it on the branch. Then his face paled. If he shared some of the warmth with it, Qin Yu would have to withstand more of the damage brought by the power of ice. The most direct manifestation of this was that the layer of ice covering his body had suddenly thickened. What followed was that with every step Qin Yu took, the layer of ice would shatter and the pain he felt would rise. But this was necessary. Even though he knew this, he still had to do it. Otherwise, without the guidance of the branch, Qin Yu wouldn't be able to find the correct position. This was something that it had mentioned before. If he wanted to save someone, he had to find the right place. Kacha! Kacha! In the darkness, rhythmic sounds constantly echoed out. This represented that Qin Yu was moving forward step after step, and he was enduring more pain than before. The pain of his flesh and bones breaking was no different from being cut alive. In front of him was boundless darkness. He couldn't see the end, but it also seemed as if there would never be an end. This was something that left him feeling even more despair than the pain he felt. But now that he had come this far, there was no turning back. Either he could leave here alive or he could die here. Like this, Meaty would fall into a deep slumber. When she woke up, she would still be that mysterious and formidable existence hidden in space-time. It was just that she would lose a small portion of her memories from her long life. Thinking of this, Qin Yu pursed his lips, a firm look in his eyes. 2 hours later, the branch in his chest nearly fell into a deep slumber. It was covered in a thick layer of ice and was frozen together with Qin Yu. After a long time, a green light flashed on its surface. As for Qin Yu, it was like he was wearing a thick suit of ice armor. Every step he took caused the ground to rumble. His vision darkened. This was a sign that his mind was reaching its limit, and he could collapse at any moment. However, this situation had been going on for quite some time now, and he was still moving forward. Although he was moving a bit slower than before, he didn't stop. Another hour later, Qin Yu's entire body was covered in a layer of ice. He had turned into a giant moving block of ice. Only the faint cracking sounds coming from within indicated that he was still alive. Their speed of advance became very slow. Often, it would take several breaths before they could take a single step forward. There was a light cracking sound mixed with the cracking sounds. It was the branch in Qin Yu's chest. It was finally unable to withstand the extreme cold outside. In a frozen state, it directly shattered into powder. Why do we still have to go forward? If you feel that there is no way out, then I can give you another choice. A calm voice suddenly sounded out in his ears. Qin Yu paused for a long time before he confirmed that this wasn't an illusion. Who are you? That isn't important. What is important is that I can allow you to leave here alive. I can consider it as you taking a different path. Why? Because I think that you are a very interesting creature. Ling, it would be a pity if you were to die here. I don't believe you. It's simple. A trace of warmth shined on Qin Yu's body. At this moment, he felt like a traveler in the desert who was about to die of thirst and suddenly had a drop of sweet spring water fall into his mouth. At this moment, the throbbing in his heart and his instinct to survive left him impatient. He instantly reacted. The voice sounded out once more. As long as you want to, you can leave at any time. You don't need to do anything, just turn a thought. If you leave here, you will discover that not only will you be unharmed, but you will also experience the dark, cold tide and obtain unexpected harvests. At that time, you will become even stronger. If you cultivate seriously, it may not be impossible for you to return here in the future and save her. And death, especially if you die here, is eternal annihilation. Your soul fragments will be used as nourishment by the person you are trying to save. She will collect, decompose, and absorb them. Of course, this is not her original intention, but please believe me when I say that this is your end. Qin Yu's body trembled. The ice ball emitted crackling sounds. He didn't know who the owner of this voice was, but he believed that there wasn't the slightest bit of falsehood in these words. But he remained silent, motionless as he endured the heart-wrenching pain. Qin Yu, you are far more outstanding than I imagined. If you had agreed just now, you would have lost the additional reward I gave you. Yes, that was a test just now, and you have already passed it. If you choose to leave now, I will give you a great fortune. For instance, I will let you see the threshold to the Emperor realm in advance. You have persisted until now and remained silent. This is already benevolent enough. No one will question you because of this. What's more, no one will ever find out about this. This is the promise I can give you right now. Believe in my sincerity. Take my reward and leave this place now. I guarantee that this will be your only chance. Qin, you could no longer speak, but because of the arrival of an unknown power, every thought he had would be spoken directly in this world. After a brief silence in the darkness, his calm voice rang out. You have very little experience. When you do something like this, your tone needs to fluctuate a little. Only then will you have the power to move people's hearts. Also, after Little Meaty fell asleep, that gaze that has been silently watching me should have come from you, right? You have hidden for so long, and only now have you jumped out and offered me such good conditions. It seems that you really don't want me to save her and leave this place. Also, I should be very close to success now, right? After several breaths of time, just as Chinyu thought that the voice wouldn't give him a response, it spoke up once more. Chinyu, you are smarter than I imagined. But smart people often understand that only when they live can there be meaning to everything. If you save her, you will die. This is the judgment of your fate, effective immediately. Chinyu's heart violently shrank. An intense fear of death shrouded his mind. For no reason at all, Chinyu's intuition told him that everything this voice said would become an unchangeable fact. If he saved little Meaty, he would die. Chinyu's mind violently shook. At this moment, his strong survival instinct crazily struggled and howled. Nod. Chinyu, nod. Hurry up and nod. With a single thought, he would be able to escape from certain death and obtain an unimaginable fortune. What did the threshold of the Emperor realm mean? If he could see it in advance, he could prepare in advance and build a solid ladder step by step. As long as he had enough time, he was destined to be able to step into it and become a true peak existence of the great, desolate world. At that time, what would that clan do? It wasn't impossible to save Ningling. However, the bright future of a great life and the end of death could be decided by a single thought. What was he still hesitating for? Nod, hurry up and nod. In his mind, he instinctively let out a mournful roar, like rolling thunder, rumbling and exploding continuously. Blood seeped out of Chinyu's orifices. Strangely, it wasn't frozen by the extreme cold of the darkness. Instead, it melted into the ice, like a drop of blood falling into clear water. It rapidly spread and dyed the entire giant block of ice dark red. Chinyu's body trembled. The blood-red block of ice constantly shattered. Kacha! Kacha! Like a madly beating heart. Refuse. Swish! In his mind, the instinctive howls and howls instantly disappeared without a trace. Along with them, the voice that had appeared in Chinyu's ears just now also disappeared. He had made his choice. It wasn't because Chinyu wasn't afraid of death, but because he knew that if he wanted to obtain anything in this world, he had to pay a price. The more he obtained, the greater the price. To leave alive the threshold of the Emperor realm, this meant that Chinyu would have to pay a price that was equal to, or even far greater than that. What would it be? Chinyu didn't know, but it definitely wouldn't be too wonderful. It might even make him feel that living was far worse than death. Since this was the case, why not take a gamble? And the reason that supported Chinyu and made him dare to take a gamble was actually very simple. Because just now, the owner of the voice had only dared to look at him after Meaty had fallen into a deep slumber. If one pondered deeply, they would be able to decipher the meaning behind it. Do you think I must die just because you say so? That wasn't necessarily the case. Moreover, the future benefits of this gamble were extremely substantial. Having Meaty by his side and not having Meaty by his side were two absolutely different circumstances. As the saying goes, the bigger the bet, the bigger the win. This time, Chinyu had even staked his own life on the line. As long as he won, he would be full. Your choice was correct. A trace of warmth suddenly spread from his chest. It was Chinyu's beating heart. Right now, it was like a sun that released endless light and heat. The ice that covered the surface of his body rapidly melted away at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chinyu gasped for breath and hurriedly closed his eyes. Under the illumination of the bright light, his face appeared incomparably pale. A great sun rose from his chest and appeared in front of him. A blurry figure emerged from within. It looked at Chinyu with a complex look in its eyes. Chinyu raised his hand and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He narrowed his eyes and allowed his tears to flow freely. I'm guessing there's a but behind your words. You guessed right. The figure within the great sun said in a calm voice, There's one thing that you are mistaken about. It isn't that he can't appear before the master of this place falls asleep, but rather that the two sides have already made an agreement. Chinyu frowned. Was I wrong? The figure within the great sun nodded. No one can change his judgment. He leaned forward and earnestly looked at Chinyu. Now, do you regret your choice? Chinyu blinked. Is there any use in regretting? The figure in the sun shook his head. Chinyu smiled. Then why should I regret it? He raised his head and looked at the darkness above him. Since you took the initiative to appear, it means that I found the right place. Is this it? Yes. Chinyu lifted a finger, his movements elegant and confident. Go. Shua. This great sun suddenly rose high into the sky, and with a loud rumble, endless light burst out like a stormy sea, violently shaking and sweeping in all directions. In an instant, it illuminated this world that was eternally shrouded in darkness. This scene was like an ancient god splitting apart the heavens and earth. Chapter 1630. The light dispersed the darkness. Meaty's eyelashes trembled slightly as she lay on a soft bed made of tree branches. She then opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the great sun above her head that released endless light and heat. Her eyes widened, and she revealed a helpless smile. Little Chinyu, you actually managed to take this step. Shua. She stepped forwards, and her figure instantly vanished. When she reappeared, she reached out a hand and caught the falling Chinyu. Save one, die one. This was the judgment of fate. No one could change it. Since Meaty had woken up, Chinyu was naturally going to die. In the western barbarian territory, at the top of Mount Hung, amidst the endless falling snow, the black-tiled temple was solemn and solemn. The grand shaman of Meng Mountain, who was sitting cross-legged on the pure white floor of the temple, suddenly sensed something. His eyes snapped open, a pained and sorrowful expression on his face. Endless despair appeared in the depths of his eyes. 6 years ago, when His Majesty's aura disappeared, the Grand Magus of Meng Mountains could only vaguely sense that His Majesty's life force was still there. It was as if he was in some strange place and had an unknown encounter. Yet, at that moment, he could clearly sense the grief and weeping that came from his berserker blood. The barbarian sovereign had passed away. The Grand Shaman of Meng Mountains took a deep breath, slowly rose to his feet and knelt down. He roared, Farewell, barbarian sovereign, for your body has transformed into the vast expanse, and your soul has returned to the earth. At the peak of Hung Mountain, a strong wind blew, and the falling snow turned blood red. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire mountain peak. It caused the snow-white world to turn into a boundless blood-red color, desolate and sorrowful. On this day, all the totems of the barbarian tribes in the barbarian territory outside the great desolate lands revealed their true forms at the same time. They knelt on the ground and wailed in grief, expressing their grief towards the death of the barbarian emperor. The world was shaken. The totem of the Flowing Fire tribe was a palm-sized spirit that was born from the underground fire vein. Now it appeared in the flames, rolling around and crying bitterly. My emperor has collapsed. The berserkers' kismet has been severed. They no longer have a path of survival. It's over, it's completely over. Everyone will die, no one will survive. The tribe leader of the Flowing Fire tribe and the few elders kneeled on the ground with pale faces. At this moment, they only felt that all their hopes had turned to dust. It wasn't because they were truly sad, but because their bloodline instinctively felt endless despair. It came from the bottom of his heart, and he could not control it at all. Now, all of them had their eyes wide open, and their hearts were filled with blankness and fear. They thought to themselves, what exactly is going on? Last year, the clan had obtained a precious stone, and it seemed that they could use it to turn the situation around. How did the situation suddenly become like this? Berserker Emperor. When did the Berserker tribe have a new emperor? Moreover, he suddenly died without any warning. A few young barbarians rushed over in a frenzy. Uncle, uncle, the tribe said that our new emperor has fallen and the barbarians are doomed. Their faces were filled with fear and panic. Then they discovered that the old barbarian's body was shaking like a sieve. His face had become extremely strange. One moment it was red, the next moment it was purple. His eyes were wide open as if they were about to explode at any moment. "Uncle, what's wrong?" A young barbarian put on a long face as he carefully reached out his hand. He was afraid that the barbarian would not be able to withstand the blow and would pass out in a single breath. "Pa!" Before he could even touch the old barbarian's face, he was slapped away. "Hee ha 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 ha. You bunch of old bastards, I'm not wrong. You're the ones who are wrong. I knew you were wrong. The end is not the end. Only by being reborn from death can we usher in true change. The great prosperity of the Berserker tribe shall begin today." They rushed out of the tent. The old barbarian knelt on the ground and continuously kissed the ground. Tears streamed down his face, and he was extremely emotional. The young barbarians of the Flowing Fire tribe looked at the old barbarian, who was on the verge of going crazy, and were about to cry. "It's over. Uncle has gone crazy from fear." Central Desolate Divine Continent, 13th Tower. The messenger flying swords were sent back as fast as they could, regardless of the cost. An old ancestor of the Sioux family, who had betrayed the family and joined the 13th Tower, did not hesitate to exhaust his entire cultivation to ascertain the heavenly secrets. The Berserker Emperor was dead. Countless cheers rang out in the 13th Tower. The Qin Empire had ordered to reduce taxes and amnesty for the people. The important figures of the 4 clans and 4 sects heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. Except for the Sioux family's Yin-Yang world, which had an extremely depressing atmosphere, they all revealed smiles. The Berserker Emperor's existence was like a fishbone in the throat to all the people in the 9 regions of the Great Desolate. If he died, then everyone would be safe. On the same day, the 3rd generation junior of the Central Desolate Li family, Li Ruhua, passed through the Wudong County's array formation and directly returned to her family. She was received by the patriarch and a group of elders. Afterwards, a great cultivator from the 13th Tower arrived. It was unknown what sort of confirmation was made, but the implications and consequences of Li Ji's death were directly erased. Li Ruhua obtained a spot to enter the 13th Tower to cultivate. It was rumored that a senior from the 11th Tower had chosen Li Ruhua and was willing to accept her as a closed-door disciple. The Li family was filled with cheers and laughter. To pique families like them, for a direct disciple to enter the 13th Tower to cultivate was a great stroke of good fortune. Li Ruhua already had a special status to begin with. After this matter, her status in the family rose once more. For a time, rumors spread out from within the Li family. As long as Li Ruhua returned from the 13th Tower, she would obtain the status of an elder. There was even a chance that she would become the next ruler of the Li family as a woman in the future. But no one knew that at this time, Li Ruhua was sitting alone in a training chamber. She looked down at the red spot on her palm, her complexion incomparably pale. He didn't feel anything at all. It was like he had slept for a very, very long time. Then, Qin slowly opened his eyes. At this moment his vision blurred. Vaguely, he seemed to see a gate that spanned the heavens and earth. This gate shined with a golden light, incomparably dazzling beneath the sunlight. But it didn't give off the slightest feeling of vulgarity. Rather, there was only endless majesty and dignity. He blinked, trying to see it more clearly. But this gate soon vanished, and a familiar face appeared in front of him. "Yo, you're finally willing to wake up? Hurry up and wipe off the drool from the corners of your mouth. How disgusting. Just what kind of dream did you have just now?" Little Meaty had a look of disgust. She swept her eyes over Qin Yu's suspicious areas, but when she couldn't find any evidence, she rolled her eyes. It was unknown whether she was disappointed or something else. "Little Meaty," Qin Yu shouted out loud. He suddenly sat up and looked around. As he felt the familiar aura around him, a smile gradually appeared on his face. "We're back." Little Meaty's eyes softened a little. "We're back." She stood up and walked outside. But you should clean up your personal problems first. You're so dirty and stinky. Soak in and take a short nap. It'll be good for you. Within the large wooden barrel, steam was rising. A pale green liquid was slowly bubbling. Chin Yu walked to the side and looked down. His eyebrows immediately furrowed together. With his messy hair and unkempt beard, he looked like a savage. Just how long did I sleep for? His lips twitched. Inexplicably, he thought back to how he had been frightened by Little Meaty. There was even a lingering fear. No, otherwise Little Meaty wouldn't be so calm. Stop trying to scare yourself. Chin Yu rubbed his chin and sat down in the barrel. Hiss! It was like countless ants had instantly drilled into his flesh and bones. It was numb and sore, but after that he felt unprecedentedly comfortable. I closed my eyes, opened my eyes, and came back. I feel like there are many things that happened here. Just as Chin Yu was thinking this, he couldn't resist the overwhelming drowsiness. He leaned against the edge of the barrel and fell asleep. Little Meaty's figure appeared beside the barrel. She thought for a moment and placed a finger between Chin Yu's eyebrows. After sensing for a moment, she let out a light breath. Chin Yu, you're fine. You're even better than before. A calm voice sounded out from behind. Little Meaty turned and glanced at him. Let's go outside and talk. All right. The two walked out, one behind the other. Outside the cave, Baiji was kneeling on the ground. Go Sheng had already woken up. Although he was emaciated, his eyes were particularly bright. Their gazes carefully fell on the two people that walked out of the cave. They knew that as long as these two wanted to, they could leave them beyond redemption with a single thought. The madam was fine. They had long since become accustomed to her unfathomably strong and unparalleled strength. But who was this man? It was fine if he was handsome to the point of being unreasonable, but he was also so strong. Go Sheng's emotions were pure curiosity and awe. As for Baiji, besides these two emotions, there was also a deep sense of dread and hostility. The man walking behind suddenly turned around. Go Sheng heard a stifled cough from the side. He turned his head and saw that Baiji had become even whiter. Beads of blood were seeping out of her mouth, nose, ears, and eyes. Strong, really strong to the point of leaving one in despair. But at this time, Go Sheng's eyes had become even brighter than before. Little Meaty didn't turn around. She lightly said, "She is my maid. Even if she is a bit stupid, if you want to beat a dog, you have to look at its master." The man behind her faintly smiled. If it weren't for that, she would already be dead. Little Meaty thought for a moment and slowly nodded, agreeing with this explanation. She stopped and casually waved her hand, but at this time she stopped midway. "You come." The man lifted a hand and isolated space, forming a small sealed world. He looked at Little Meaty and hesitated for a moment. "In order to save Chin Yu, is it worth it to pay such a price?" Little Meaty said, "Is there a possibility of regret?" The man shook his head. Little Meaty coldly sneered. "Isn't that just nonsense?" The man thought for a moment and then cupped his hands together. "In the end, I still have to thank you." Little Meaty waved her hand. "There is no need. When Chin Yu saved me, he didn't think too much about it." She paused for a moment and then said, "There are some things he will definitely ask you. Just tell him as we agreed." The man nodded. "All right." Little Meaty looked at him. "I find it a bit strange that you would actually agree to help and expose yourself to him. You and I both know the risks involved in this matter. So can you give me an explanation?" The man was silent for a moment. Then he faintly smiled. "The explanation is that I feel that I should save you. When it comes to things like intuition, you have to believe in it. Moreover, the current situation isn't as dangerous as you say it is. For the two of us to stand here and speak, that is the best evidence." "Humph!" Little Meaty coldly sneered. "He only has scruples in his heart. If there is a chance in the future, he definitely won't be lenient." The man didn't deny this. His expression was faint. Then don't give him a chance. Moreover, besides you and me, Qin Yu has other cards in his hand. As he spoke to her, there was a thoughtful look on his face. Although his memories hadn't been restored, after reaching this step, he could certainly sense that there was something unusual about Qin Yu. Or it was more accurate to say that he had already discovered something. In the past, when he was chosen to be the vessel, was it really just a coincidence? Or was it something that was predestined long ago? Chapter 1631. Little Meaty seemed to guess his thoughts. She lightly said, "There are some things that can only be verified with time. Thinking too much about it is useless." The man thought for a moment. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "I understand." He stood up and said, "Your current state is similar to the other one. As for the one who hasn't been unsealed yet, I think we should wait and see." Little Meaty said, "That's what I think too." She looked back in the direction of the cave. "Qin Yu has woken up. You can go now. Remember not to speak too much." The man faintly smiled. "Okay." He turned around. This time, Baiji lowered her head, not daring to reveal the least bit of disrespect. In the wooden barrel, Qin Yu woke up. He felt his entire body brimming with energy, and his condition was at an unprecedented peak. As he closed his eyes and sensed his body, he opened his eyes as he heard footsteps. He looked at the man walking in from outside the cave and asked, "What happened after I fell unconscious?" The man stopped beside the barrel. He furrowed his eyebrows. "I promised her that I wouldn't speak carelessly." Qin Yu sneered. "It seems you have forgotten who is on your side." He stood up and prepared to pull the man into the barrel. The man dodged to the side. He helplessly shook his head. "Even if you want to commit suicide, you shouldn't frame me." "Hurry up and speak." The man looked up into Qin Yu's eyes. "You died." He paused for a moment and then said, "And now you're alive again." Qin Yu frowned. "Don't learn to speak like that. It's hard for me to listen. Moreover, was the price she paid very great?" "Very great." The man had a serious expression. "So, I think you should treat her a little better in the future." Qin Yu rubbed his temples. He had clearly disregarded his life and risked everything to save her. So why did he end up owing her a favor? The man's smile widened. A truly intelligent man will never haggle over the women around him. Qin Yu glanced at him. "Are you very experienced?" The man's smile froze. "Humph." Qin Yu curled his lips. "Then stop putting on an act. Let's get down to business. Did we make a loss this time, or did we make a profit?" The man said, "From the looks of it, we made a profit." He raised a finger. "First, Little Meaty is back. With her by your side, as long as you don't seek death, it shouldn't be too difficult. Second, didn't you see a door just now? There's no need to doubt it. It's not an illusion. It's the gate you're thinking about. Since you've seen it, there's hope for the great Tao in the future. However, this isn't because that person is fulfilling his promise. This is an opportunity given to you by Little Meaty. That's why I said that you'd better treat her a little better. Thirdly, the Berserker Sovereign has fallen. The human cultivators have already confirmed this, so you don't have to worry about being hunted down anymore. You can relax a little." Qin Yu glanced at him. "Tell me about the losses." The man nodded and put up another finger. "First, I've been exposed. This matter will definitely have hidden dangers, but it'll be fine in the short term. Secondly, Little Meaty had lost something, so her future abilities would be slightly reduced. Thirdly, the Berserker Sovereign is dead, but this matter is still fake, and your identity has already been discovered." He looked at Qin Yu, his eyes earnest. 30 years. You only have 30 years. Then, everything will be revealed to the world. At that time, the human cultivators will stop at nothing to kill you. Believe me, only by stepping into the Emperor realm will you have a chance at survival. Otherwise, you'll definitely die. Even if Little Meaty and I act together and use all of our trump cards, we still won't be able to save you." Qin Yu raised a hand and rubbed the space between his brows. "Stepping into the Emperor realm in 30 years. Even though he'd already seen that door, he still felt pressure, like a mountain. There was no pretense at all. It was true. The Berserker sovereign realm was known as the Apex realm, the level of the world's overlords. In the past tens of millions of years, countless geniuses had shone like stars in the sky, but how many of them had stepped into the Emperor realm, the great Western desolation, a vast empire that had accumulated countless years of history, only had 7 of them. How difficult would it be to step into that realm? Qin Yu's expression suddenly changed as he looked at the man in front of him. Half. The man shook his head. Qin Yu's face was ashen. Just like that, what nonsense was this about profiting? He might as well just tell him to enjoy his time in peace and wait for his death after 30 years. If there's a chance, we don't want you to die, but 30 years is too short, so short that you can't afford to make any mistakes. The man slowly said, Little Meat has already arranged the specifics. You must hurry up from here on out. He turned around and walked out. Qin Yu gritted his teeth and growled, You're leaving just like that? I'm leaving. Don't think about it anymore. Did you forget something? The man didn't turn around. He tossed out an item. Qin Yu reached out and caught it. The item unfurled and wrapped around his wrist, turning into a light green bracelet. Traces of joy and joy flowed into Qin Yu's heart. I lent it to you. Remember to return it to me in the future. Also, only 6 years have passed in the Desolation Realm. You really are just scaring yourself. The man's footsteps paused as he walked out of the cave. His eyes fell on Baiji. Put away all your thoughts. If you dare move even a little bit, you will die. Whoosh! His figure vanished into thin air. Baiji knelt on the ground, her face pale as if she was seriously ill. Her entire body was drenched in sweat. The footsteps stopped. She raised her head with difficulty, her lips moving. Madam, bang, Baiji was sent flying away by a heavy kick. Merits and demerits cancel each other out. After this kick, you can still live for the time being, but don't think that I will save you. Her eyes fell on Dog Leftover. He struggled to stand up and kowtowed with difficulty. As a dog, you are qualified. I am very satisfied with you. With a kick, Dog Leftover tumbled on the ground, tumbling several times before coming to a stop. If I tell you where to go, your life will be preserved for the time being. But if you can't arrive in time, then you are fated to die. Dog Leftover stood up. After respectfully bowing without hesitation, he rose up from the ground and vanished without a trace. She had also been kicked, but Dog Leftover had survived. Baiji's merits and demerits cancel each other out. The disparity could be seen with a single glance. But her eyes were still as calm as before, without the least bit of resentment or unwillingness. As her eyes fell on Meaty, there was only respect and reverence. Humph! With a sneer, Meaty stepped into the cave, towards the eyes behind her. She didn't feel the slightest bit of pity. An idiot should enjoy the treatment of an idiot. Otherwise, wouldn't the smart people of this world suffer too much? Qin Yu had already tidied himself up. It wouldn't be too much to say that he had rosy lips and white teeth. After waking up, he discovered that he had undone his changing state and returned to his original appearance. He wasn't just a little bit more handsome than Ning Qin. Meaty curled her lips. She looked him up and down several times. Your appearance isn't too bad. Qin Yu ignored her teasing. He slowly said, Baiji has been loyal and devoted to you. Her performance these past 6 years is the best evidence. Before she finished speaking, she was interrupted. Meaty sneered. Do I need you to teach me how to do things? She sat down, still seething with anger. Vanish. Men really couldn't be trusted. He had clearly promised to keep his mouth shut, but in the blink of an eye he had sold her out. This was simply preposterous. Feeling the way Qin Yu was looking at her, Meaty couldn't stand it any longer. Her eyes widened and she fiercely said, Qin Yu, listen to me well. I was willing to save you because you saved me first. So we're even now. You don't owe me anything, so don't look at me like that. It makes my entire body feel uncomfortable. Qin Yu thought for a moment and nodded. If you say it like that, it actually makes sense. It's just like how you easily paid off all my debts in the past. An unnatural expression appeared on Meaty's face. She didn't look at Qin Yu. Speak frankly. What do you want? Qin Yu said, Tell me, what is your current condition? In order to save me, what price did you pay? Meaty coldly sneered. Don't listen to that person's boasting. He's just trying to make himself look good so that you think you've already profited by surviving. This matter, he is responsible for it. If he had acted earlier, then everything would have been fine. Why did he have to wait until the end? Qin Yu looked at her, not speaking. Meaty spread out her hands and spun them around twice. Look carefully. I'm perfectly fine right now. There isn't a problem at all. Seeing Qin Yu remain silent, his eyes shrouding her, Meaty angrily rubbed her temples. That's right, I paid some price. If I was omnipotent in the past, then right now, I only have around 9,900 abilities left. Qin Yu said, Tell me in detail. Meaty hatefully said, Tell me in detail. Now that I have returned to this world, I can only display the strength of a ruler. Once I exceed that, I will lose my source and need to sleep to restore it. This can be considered an additional limit to my strength. Are you satisfied now? She angrily said, Qin Yu, that's enough. If I knew you were so annoying, I would have just watched you die. Qin Yu nodded. Then let's leave it at that. He took a deep breath and slowly let it out. Looking at the gloomy Meaty across from him, he bitterly smiled inwardly. She definitely wasn't speaking the truth. Although he didn't know who the owner of that voice in Meaty's home was, it wasn't hard to determine just how terrifying that person's boundary was through what the little blue lamp had added. A single word could determine the fate of a living being. Even if Qin Yu was at the ruler realm, he would still be judged dead on the spot by that single word. If Meaty wanted to reverse this matter and forcefully save him, the price she had to pay would definitely be far greater than what she had said. The so-called upper limit of the ruler realm's strength should only be one of the symptoms she couldn't conceal after paying the price. Just because she wasn't willing to say it didn't mean that Qin Yu wouldn't admit it, nor did it mean that the two of them were even. For instance, the debt that Qin Yu had mentioned just now, was the help that Meaty had given him really something that could be repaid with the value of treasures? Moreover, those things had been loaned to him afterwards. A person couldn't be without a conscience. This was why Qin Yu had disregarded the dangers and first sought out His Excellency the ruler. After receiving his reminder, he had sought out the little blue lamp. He hadn't hesitated to expose his greatest secret in order to save her. There were some things that one could choose not to do, but there were some things that one absolutely had to do. Otherwise, even if one lived for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, even if one lived as long as the heavens themselves, so what? Looking back, his heart felt uneasy. Looking at Meaty, Qin Yu smiled and said, Tell me, what are we going to do next? I heard that you've already made arrangements. He would keep it in his heart for now. If there was a chance in the future, he would do what he had to do. There was no need to say too much. Chapter 1632. Nank Country, at the foot of Xiaoliang Mountain, the former Ox Village. It still retained this name, but it had become the ancestral land of the Qin dynasty that was heavily guarded. In the blink of an eye, 60 years had passed. 6 years had passed in the outside world, but in this strange place where time flowed at an astonishing speed, nearly 2,000 years had passed. Taoist Cloudy Mist had obtained the great Tao, and his cultivation had increased tremendously. He was now one of the top figures in Nank and Huangliang countries. He was still free and unfettered. It was said that once he obtained the longevity fruit, he could live with the world. The Qin family that was protected by his bloodline rose with the tide. The family's power continued to grow. Finally, 200 years ago, they established a country and became the third country in the world after Nank and Huangliang countries, the Great Qin. It was rumored that after the Qin dynasty was established, the founding Qin emperor moved the graves of the two ancestors who were the foundation of the family into the emperor's mausoleum to stabilize the destiny of the Qin dynasty. Daoist cloudy mist appeared in the Qin palace. No one knew what he said to the Qin emperor, but this matter was dropped. The Qin dynasty designated an area of 800 miles around Xiaoliang Mountain as the ancestral land of the Great Qin dynasty. The imperial court sent a large number of soldiers to guard it. After 200 years, the Qin dynasty grew stronger day by day. The weather was good, the country was prosperous, and the people were at peace. The ancestors' protection naturally contributed to this. The Qin emperor set out a month ago, leaving the imperial capital to patrol the world. He arrived at the ancestral land yesterday. He would fast and bathe for 3 days before personally paying his respects to the ancestors. The heavily guarded surroundings of Xiaoliang Mountain were now even more heavily guarded, attracting the attention of all the people in the world. The Qin dynasty had been in power for 200 years, and the Qin emperor was now in his 4th generation. The current emperor was called Qin Xuanzong. He was a dignified, middle-aged man in his 50s. At this moment, he was wearing a white robe. He was riding an ordinary carriage with only a woman from the palace, a young son, and 2 old eunuchs. They were slowly heading towards the Daoist temple, halfway up Xiaoliang Mountain. The temple was called Xiaoliang Mountain, but it had not been famous for many years. Only those who had read the secret records of the royal family could discover the close relationship between this Daoist temple and the great Qin Empire. Every emperor would return to the ancestral land to pay respects to the ancestors 3 to 5 years before they were crowned the crown prince. This was also the reason for today's trip. The 2 eunuchs had been in the palace for a long time and were absolutely trustworthy. One drove the carriage while the other closed his eyes to rest. Inside the carriage, the noblewoman in the palace, who obviously already knew something, couldn't help but feel nervous. She grabbed her son's hand, intending to remind him of something. However, she was afraid that if she said too much, she would make a mistake and lose her usual grace. Qin Xuanzong smiled. He didn't care. When he followed his father to the Qingliang temple, his mother was even more nervous than imperial concubine Shu. The succession of the throne could not be decided by the Qin emperor alone. It seemed like a scandal of the imperial family, but in reality, it was a secret that the Qin clan accepted wholeheartedly. Although there were records of how their ancestors formed the celestial destiny, nothing in the world could withstand the erosion of time, not to mention the small ox village at the foot of the mountain. The Qin clan, which was born as a countryside doctor, had now enjoyed the power of the country for more than 200 years. The difference between them was more than just the difference between heaven and earth. No matter how great the favor was, there would always be a time when it was used up. And whether or not they had the support of the top immortals on the mountain, the Qin Empire would naturally be in a different situation. All they could do was maintain enough respect and try their best to increase their karmic ties with the immortals on the mountain peak. There was no need to say more about the crown prince, and this was also a heavy karma. So regarding the matter of the emperor's inheritance, it was necessary to ask the old Taoist in the Qingliang temple who had been cultivating in seclusion. Within the Qin clan, anyone with a discerning eye was sincerely convinced by the brilliant plan that the founding emperor had come up with in the past. The carriage stopped. 2 eunuchs jumped down and respectfully waited at the side. Qin Xuanzong pushed open the door and stepped down. He lightly said, "You wait here." "Yes, your majesty." He took his son's hand and glanced at imperial concubine Shu. Imperial concubine Shu faintly smiled. "Let's go." The emperor personally knocked on the door. The door of the Taoist temple opened, and a little Taoist boy walked out. He respectfully bowed. "Your majesty, master invites you in." Qin Xuanzong smiled and returned greeting. "Thank you, little immortal master." The little Taoist boy's face was tense, but he was still somewhat cautious. It was probably because he hadn't been on the mountain for long. The 4th prince was a 12 or 13 years old boy. He looked at the little Taoist boy in front of him with red lips and white teeth. He smiled and said, "You are so handsome. When you grow up, you must be very good-looking." The woman in the palace was startled. Her expression changed slightly, and she was about to speak, but she was stopped by Qin Xuanzong's eyes. The little Taoist boy's face was slightly red, but he wasn't angry. He whispered, "You are also very good-looking." Qin Xuanzong laughed out loud. After entering the temple, the Taoists in the Qingliang temple received an order to stay in their rooms and not go out. The little Taoist boy led the way and brought the 3 people of the imperial family to the backyard where the master was in seclusion. "Master, His Majesty is here." Come in." He pushed the door open and entered. The little Taoist boy walked to the side and slightly lowered his eyes, looking like a calm adult. The 4th prince found this very interesting. His lips curled up into a smile as he quietly sized up everything in the room. He didn't know the truth of today's trip. He only thought that his father brought him to see an immortal master who was on good terms with the imperial family. Qin Xuanzong looked at the room. Taoist Cloudy Mist's appearance hadn't changed in the slightest from decades ago. He suppressed his surging and complex emotions and cupped his hands. "Qin Cheng, I brought my concubine, Shu, and my son, Qin Song, to visit the old immortal." He didn't have much etiquette, but his tone was very respectful. The 4th prince was startled and hurriedly followed his father and bowed. Over the years, he had seen many immortal masters on the mountain. Some of them were very famous in the 3 countries. However, he had never seen his father being so respectful to someone before. His attitude was so humble. Taoist Cloudy Mist smiled and raised his hand. "Your Majesty, there is no need to be so polite. Please sit." He turned around and ordered, "Little boy, serve tea to His Majesty, Her Highness, and the Prince." Qin Xuanzong said, "I don't dare to trouble little immortal master. Qin Song, go and pour tea for the old immortal." His eyes were obscure and deep. If he didn't truly like Qin Xuanzong, he wouldn't have gone against the opinions of the masses and chosen the 4th prince, the son of a concubine. He brought him all the way to Qingliang Mountain because he had high hopes for him. Qin Song took a deep breath. "Yes, Imperial Father." He took 2 steps forward and bowed. "Old immortal master, Qin Song doesn't understand the etiquette of the mountain. If I offended you, please forgive me." He poured the tea until it was 80% full. He covered the cup and slowly returned to his original place. This simple matter caused beads of sweat to appear on the forehead of this 10-year-old noble. Taoist Cloudy Mist glanced at Qin Song, who had returned to his original place. He faintly smiled and picked up the teacup. Qin Xuanzong immediately revealed a smile. The eyes of the woman next to him reddened. She nearly cried on the spot. Qin Xuanzong bowed. "Old immortal master, please bestow me a name." At this moment, a word appeared in Taoist Cloudy Mist's mind. He smiled. Mu. 15 years later, Qin Xuanzong passed away. The 5th emperor of the Great Qin, Qin Muzong, inherited the throne. On the day that Emperor Mu of Qin ascended to the throne, outside the Ox village of the Qin dynasty, a young man appeared out of thin air in the graveyard of the Qin clan's ancestors. He stared at the gravestone that had been weathered by the wind and rain for thousands of years. 6 years ago, Li Mu came here once. He hesitated whether or not to make a move. He opened the coffin to take a look to confirm his thoughts. But in the end, he still didn't make a move. After that, every year, Li Mu would come here once. He would do nothing but quietly stay here for an entire day. No one had ever discovered his whereabouts. Even Taoist Cloudy Mist, who had been quietly cultivating on Qingliang Mountain and was known to have an unfathomable cultivation level. Today, as he looked at the tombstone in front of him, the depths of Li Mu's eyes became increasingly deep, like a bottomless sea. He frowned and slowly said, "Is it just a coincidence that the great Qin Empire is here? Or is there a deeper meaning?" Li Mu felt even more awe and fear towards the madam that he had never truly met. When her whereabouts were unknown, he didn't act rashly. Now that she had returned, Li Mu naturally wouldn't act again. He would look and look again. He never lacked patience. If he couldn't see clearly in this life, then he would wait for the next reincarnation. West Desolate Border Military, Mine Cave. Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin's whereabouts were unknown, although the imperial capital announced that they had sent Marquis Zhongwu for another important matter. As time passed, some rumors continued to spread. Finally, there were bad signs. True Saint Baiyu buried his head under the lamp, frowning as he dealt with military affairs. In just a few years, his hair had turned white. It could be seen that the past few years had been really difficult. In fact, if it weren't for his royal bloodline and his powerful uncle, the sky-bearing king, True Saint Baiyu would have been ostracized long ago. Who? With a low shout, True Saint Baiyu suddenly looked up, his eyes shining brightly. A figure walked out of the darkness. What came into view was a strange yet familiar face. It was as if he had seen it somewhere before. The other party didn't attack and instead appeared on his own initiative. True Saint Baiyu took a deep breath and coldly said, "Who are you? How dare you trespass into an important place of the army? Don't you know that the military law is ruthless?" Qin Yu thought for a moment and slowly said, "Southwest Desolate Region, Broken World, East Sea, Wanlu," across from him. True Saint Baiyu's eyes widened. "It's you." His joy faded and he asked, "What did I say that day?" A strange expression appeared on Qin Yu's face. "You called me brother, Wanlu, said you wanted to kill the enemy side by side with me, and you seemed to have a good impression of me." True Saint Baiyu was overjoyed. "It's really you. I knew that we would meet again in the future after we parted ways in the past." He strode over and patted Qin Yu's shoulder. "When I returned to the West Desolate, I tried to find you, but I didn't get any news. You are if it's not convenient to say, then forget it. You and I don't need to care about our identities." Qin Yu was a bit dazed. He looked at the excited True Saint Baiyu and thought, "Those white hair at your temples are fake, right? How come you haven't made any progress in the past few years? Or could it be that I really am your nemesis? As soon as we met, did your brain cramp?" Qin Yu took a deep breath and rubbed his face. His voice changed a bit. "Baiyu, take a good look at who I am." Shua, the face in front of him changed. With the crackling of bones and muscles, the one who appeared in front of him was the Marquis Ningqin, who had been missing for 6 years. True Saint Baiyu sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes widened and his fingers trembled, unable to speak. Qin Yu was a bit worried that he would faint in the next moment. You, why were you?" Qin Yu coughed. "I can explain this matter." An hour later, the dreaming True Saint Baiyu sat in a chair in a daze. Then he lifted his hand and slapped himself across the face. "Pa, it hurts." His eyes brightened. "It's true, it's all true. Ha ha ha. No wonder I always felt that the Marquis was pleasing to the eye and that I felt close to him from the bottom of my heart. So he is Brother Wanlu. My Baiyu's judgment of people is as accurate as ever and incomparably powerful." Chapter 1633. The reason Qin Yu revealed his identity to True Saint Baiyu wasn't because he couldn't transform back, but because of the Western Wasteland. What he needed to do next required great support from the Western Wasteland. He had to erase the unknown fear and wariness in the Western Wasteland great emperor's heart. Thinking about it, Qin Yu changing his appearance and impersonating the Dark Ruler to enter the desolate region might have some flaws. With Qin Yu's current status and importance in the Western Wasteland, revealing his identity shouldn't be too risky. Rather than being suspected by the Western Wasteland in the future and failing at the last step, he might as well take the initiative to clear the mines now. At worst, he could just abandon his identity as Marquis Loyal Marshal. As the little blue lamp had warned him before he left, 30 years was an incomparably short period of time. There was no room for mistakes. He could walk down a more difficult and thorny road, but he couldn't walk down a relatively flat road and only discover a fatal problem halfway through. A carriage quietly stopped in the wilderness. Chin Yu pushed open the door and rubbed his temples. I've obtained my new identity, but we aren't in a hurry to leave. I still have something to do. Little Meaty frowned. Where to? Ironthorn City. 6 years had passed since the storm at the Western Border Army Camp. Ironthorn City, which had always been jittery, had returned to its former tranquility because it was used to seeing heads rolling on the ground. The only thing that made the people of the city sigh with emotion was that the Wong family residence was now in ruins. In the past, the Wong family was one of the highest-ranked families in Ironthorn City. They enjoyed wealth and glory for generations. But who would have thought that they would be embroiled in a high-level struggle of the border army, causing the deaths of hundreds of people in the entire family? Wong Kai had become a headless ghost in the underworld, but many elders in Ironthorn City still cursed and poked at his back. They used him as a negative example to educate their children. They said that he was an evil creature who had forgotten his ancestors and destroyed the entire Wong family for his own selfish desires. Even after his death, he would still be burned. Another change wasn't too conspicuous. The black iron wine was still being sold, but from the brewing workshop to the retail store, everything had changed. That charming woman who had provoked countless men in the city and caused them to suffer from the evil hands of her family's ikshas was now missing. Many of the men who were still drinking the black iron wine couldn't help but sigh when they thought about it. Without that woman to accompany the wine, they couldn't help but feel refreshed when they drank. Some people said that the woman married a young man who came to the border to make a living. He was tall and strong, and one could tell at a glance that he was the kind of person who could cause trouble. He also had a few taels of silver in his hands. Thus, he was raised in the courtyard and rarely showed his face in public. This made many talkative border town women snort disdainfully. They said that no matter how they looked at it, that lascivious hussy didn't have a happy life, and that such a plausible rumor could never be trusted. On this day, a carriage stopped outside the shop that sold black iron wine. The reason why it attracted everyone's attention was because the driver was a woman. Most of the people in the borderlands were ferocious, so it wasn't rare for a woman to drive a carriage. However, the woman in front of him was dressed in a white robe. Although only her eyes were exposed, they still couldn't conceal her fiery charm. There were burning gazes, but no one dared to act recklessly. The borderlands of Empire had never been peaceful, and it was normal for people to die. As long as it didn't cause too much of a commotion, the soldiers didn't like to meddle in other people's business. The woman's carriage looked travel-worn. Since it could smoothly arrive at Ironthorn City, it in itself was a kind of invisible deterrence. The carriage stopped and the door opened. A young man walked out. His aura was restrained and his expression was calm. However, there was a hint of calmness in his every movement. The surrounding gazes fell on the white-robed woman like a mouse seeing an old cat, and they immediately withdrew. It wasn't a good thing to say, but it was an essential skill to make a living in the borderlands. Only a blind person wouldn't be able to see that this young man wasn't someone to be trifled with. It was likely that he could pull everyone's head off without blinking. He approached the wine shop and found the owner. No one knew what he said, but he quickly turned around and bid farewell. The carriage slowly drove away and disappeared from everyone's sight. 2 hours later, the carriage stopped outside an inconspicuous small courtyard in the north of Ironthorn City. This time the man didn't appear. The white-robed woman jumped off the carriage and knocked on the door. There seemed to be no one in the courtyard. The white-robed woman knocked for a long time, but there was no response. Just as she furrowed her eyebrows and a chill appeared in the air around her, a man's calm voice echoed out from the carriage. "Good. Since he isn't here, let's go." The white-robed woman respectfully nodded. She returned to the carriage, pulled on the reins, and slowly left. In the small courtyard on the bed in the room, lying in a man's arms, The woman's long dress had mostly fallen off. Her face flushed with excitement, then paled. Her eyes were filled with panic. The man in front of her was tall, and he was also capable of tossing and turning. But he wasn't someone who came to the border to make a living, but someone who came from the border army. He was one of the interrogators who had been ordered to investigate the assassination of Marquis Zhongwu. Afterwards, he found the woman. It was unknown what agreement the two came to, but she was soon removed from the eyes of all parties and raised in this small courtyard. "I'm afraid," the woman's voice trembled. Her snow-white chest was tightly pressed against the man's body. Her arms wrapped around his neck like snakes, her body shivering. The interrogator frowned, his complexion gloomy. "There's no need to be afraid. What happened in the past has already been settled. No one will have the patience to deal with you. I'll wait 6 years before I make a move." Puff. With a dull thud, the interrogator's eyes widened. Thick blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. A bloody hole had been torn open on his back. His heart was in the woman's hand, still beating unwillingly as it spat out massive amounts of blood. She casually pushed the interrogator onto the bed and stood up. She didn't care at all about her exposed body. She slowly said, "You're right, but I should still be a bit more careful. I can't rely on a fluke in my heart. I've used you to hide for several years, but now I must leave." She blinked, a charming smile on her face. "I'll take 6 years of service in exchange for your heart today. That's quite fair." She tossed the heart into her mouth. As she chewed, she fell to the floor dead. A moment later, space twisted and a translucent shadow appeared in the room. Looking around, he muttered, "There's no one here. Could it be that I'm being too cautious?" Just as her voice fell, the translucent shadow froze in place. Little Meaty grabbed onto her neck. Her eyes swept over the blood on the bed, and she frowned. Her grip tightened. "Kill it." Qin Yu's voice echoed in her ears. Without hesitation, Little Meaty clenched her fingers. With a dull puff, a high-quality Yin spirit was extinguished. Shwa! Little Meaty's figure vanished. She returned to the carriage that had already left Iron Thorn City. As she carefully wiped her hands with gauze, she frowned. Qin Yu smiled apologetically. "I've troubled you. After all, you are the most suitable person to deal with this matter. Those who are more capable do more work." Was this praise? Little Meaty rolled her eyes. "Stop. I don't want to touch this sort of dirty work in the future. I still find it disgusting." Qin Yu smiled. He didn't argue with her any further. He lightly said, "Now I have an approximate idea of Wu Tongtian's background. The commander of the Western Border Army, the one who controlled 40% of the Empire's border armies, the one who truly deserved to be called a super boss of the military, was actually one of them. How interesting." A sharp light burst out from deep within Qin Yu's eyes. He had wasted precious time going to Iron Thorn City and deliberately alerting the enemy. Of course, it wasn't because he was bored. Between him and the Western Wilds, they were simply using each other. No matter what happened, there would always be some harvests in the future once this matter was revealed. Heaven-pulling sect. Within the borders of the Western Wilds, the influence of sects declined with each passing day. They had fallen to the top of the ruling class. Although this was an indisputable fact, this didn't mean that the cultivators within the sects lived difficult lives. In fact, compared to the vast number of living beings beneath the heavens, the cultivators of these sects were absolutely superior. As for the famous heaven-pulling sect in the northwestern region of the empire, because their ancestor was a half-emperor Taoist heaven-pulling Taoist, even though he had long since decayed and died, the connections and foundation he left behind still made the heaven-pulling sect a cut above the rest. In recent years, the heaven-pulling sect's ancestral hall had been incomparably excited because they had found a peerless jade. After several years of cultivation, there was no doubt that their foresight had been proven. The entire sect viewed this person as a treasure and had high hopes for him. It was said that 2 years ago, when the sect leader was drunk, he had boasted that within 100 years, the heaven-pulling sect would have a peak ruler. He had even said that he would be able to cross the threshold of the emperor realm within 200 years. Once this was achieved, the heaven-pulling sect would be able to restore the status and glory of their ancestors. They would then be able to ascend to the heavens in a single step and replace the position of the demonic sect. They would become the new leader of all the sects in the world. They might even be able to reverse the current situation where the sect's influence was declining like the setting sun, and lead the sects and factions back to the top of the ruling class. At that time, all the sects and factions in the world would owe great karma to the heaven-pulling sect. This was all to ensure that the sect's legacy could be passed down for tens of thousands of years. 6 years was enough for a 12-year-old youth to become an elegant young master, not to mention that Qin Yu hadn't grown crooked in the slightest. Now he stood on the mountain peak in his white robes, fluttering in the wind like an immortal. It was as if he were a true immortal who had descended to this world. The female cultivators of the heaven-pulling sect looked at him with infatuation. If there were peach blossoms here, they would probably be in full bloom all year round. Sigh. Qin Yu, who looked like a young man, sighed. His brows furrowed slightly, and there was a hint of worry on his face. His frown almost shattered the hearts of his senior and junior sisters. A female cultivator in a white dress of the same style, who was as beautiful as a flower and as beautiful as the moon, took a step forward and said softly, "Junior brother Yu, what's wrong? If there's something bothering you, you can tell me. Maybe I can help you solve your problems." Qin Yu faintly smiled. He turned around and said, "I see how enchanting the green mountains are. It's just that autumn is gradually approaching, and there will be a day when the mountains will wither and turn yellow. I feel a bit emotional." The senior sister in the white dress smiled. "How difficult can that be? I will go back and report to the sect so that the old ancestor can use a supernatural power to prevent the bitter cold of autumn and winter, allowing the mountains to remain green all year round." Qin Yu shook his head. "Thank you for your good intentions, senior sister, but life and death are the principles of the heavenly Tao. How can I easily interfere with it?" He shook his head again, helplessness on his face. What will come. How can I hide from it? As he finished speaking, Qin Yu revealed a smile. He cupped his hands towards his senior and junior sisters and took a step forward. "I have a guest who has arrived. I will be leaving first." His figure flew far away, like a white rainbow disappearing in the blink of an eye. The women behind him were even more dazzled, and they wanted to pull him into their arms and cherish him. After several breaths of time, the white rainbow came to a stop and rolled to the ground. Qin Yu, overflowing with the aura of an immortal, knelt on the ground with a thud and respectfully kowtowed. "Qin Yu greets master." The car door opened. Qin Yu sat inside and sneered, "If you don't greet me, you won't have to face me? Qin Yu, what do you think I should do with you?" Qin Yu faintly smiled. At this moment, the sky was bright and beautiful, and it seemed as if all things in the world had come to life. "Madam, the past is the past. Since we are all still alive, we should look forward. Leave me and pretend that nothing has happened. That is the best choice, especially now that Master is very pressed for time. Only with my help will you be able to step into the Emperor realm as soon as possible." His tone was calm, as if victory was already in his grasp. Little Rose's lips curled up, her eyes cold. "It seems that you are very confident." Chapter 1634. Qin Yu kowtowed again. "Master, I was wrong before. Today, Qin Yu swears that I will never have the slightest thought of offending you in the future. I ask that you be magnanimous and give me a chance to turn over a new leaf." There was silence. Qin Yu knelt on the ground. His face paled and beads of sweat covered his forehead. As his white robes were nearly soaked through, Qin Yu finally spoke up. "Qin Yu, I've thought about it carefully. In truth, swallowing you isn't a bad choice." His expression was calm, not revealing any of his inner thoughts. After all, You also said that I am short on time. So, the fastest way to increase my strength is a good way. What do you think? Qin Yu's body shivered. He finally couldn't hold himself back any longer. He looked up to reveal a crying face. Master, please don't. I was born sloppy, and I often don't wash my feet for a year and a half. Moreover, I don't eat regularly, and I like to gorge myself on food and drink, so I suffer from constipation all year round. If you eat me, that would be blasphemy and irresponsibility towards yourself. I absolutely won't allow you to ruin yourself like this. Little Meaty coldly sneered. It doesn't matter. I am very good at washing myself. Even if you jump into a pit of shit and soak in it for 3 to 5 years, I can still turn you into a delicious feast. She looked at Qin Yu, her eyes eager to try. Qin Yu thought for a moment. Qin Yu was so scared that he peed himself. His nose was covered with snot and tears. He no longer had the demeanor of a banished immortal. Instead, he cried in a pitiful manner that moved one's expression. Master, I know I was wrong. Please give me a chance, give me another chance. Qin Yu reached out a hand, silently looking at him. Qin Yu's eyes are very red. He blinks a few times. His tears are falling down with a pitter-patter. If you continue to play dumb, you really will die. Oh! Qin Yu wiped his tears. He reached out a hand and slapped between his eyebrows. A mass of light flew out and his complexion paled. Qin Yu reached out a hand and the mass of light fell into his hand, disappearing without a trace. You said it yourself. This is your last chance. If you let me sense anything else, you can prepare an elegiac couplet ahead of time. The carriage door closed. Baiji turned her horse around and slowly rode into the distance. Qin Yu stood up and gently sighed. Honorable master, come out. You can't even hide from me, much less them. Shwa! Shwa! 5 figures appeared at the same time. There were men and women, young and old, but all of their auras were obscure and deep, and their eyes were ghastly. That's right, they are all Qin Yu's teachers. In the past, when a peerless piece of jade fell from the sky, the hall of the founders of the heaven-pulling school almost had an internal strife. Unable to come to an agreement, no one was willing to give up. Thus, with a wave of his hand, the sect leader decided that everyone would teach him together. That was why there were these 5 masters. Of course, the sect leader of the heaven-plucking sect was definitely one of them. Qin Yu, who are they? Qin Yu crawled up and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. It's someone our heaven-pulling sect absolutely cannot afford to offend. His words caused the 5 heaven-plucking sect elders to choke and roll their eyes at the same time. One of them, who looked to be in her 30s, walked over and touched Qin Yu's head. Is he really that strong? My disciple has never suffered such injustice. I really can't swallow this. Qin Yu sighed. He helplessly said, A true man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. Let's endure this. He swept his eyes over the 5 heaven-plucking sect elders in front of him. His tone was earnest. I'm serious. Let's just forget about this. Don't go to your death and drag me down with you. His tone was unkind, but the 5 people from the heaven-plucking sect seemed used to it. It was as if he was used to it and wasn't angry at all. However, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. They had sensed that Qin Yu was different. Otherwise, they wouldn't have such confidence in him. They wouldn't have believed that he would be able to reach the Emperor realm. If even they feared him, just who were the man and woman in the carriage? Within the carriage, Qin Yu opened his eyes, a cold light flashing in them. Little Meaty said, That little fellow is truly afraid. That's why he called them over. Her lips curved up in a smile. Don't worry, the people of the heaven-plucking sect definitely won't dare to do anything moreover. Even if they did, would they be afraid that I would hold on? Qin Yu nodded. Little Meaty glanced at him. Qin Yu is right. For you, him being alive is the best result. Eating him isn't impossible, but you and I both know that is just to scare him. Eating him was easy, but digesting him was far too difficult. But Qin, you only had 30 years. Otherwise, this could be considered a good way to rapidly increase his cultivation. Qin Yu said, "He was born as a spirit embryo of the heavens and earth, possessing great destiny and great karma. Now that he has become my vassal, it's normal for him to be unwilling. So, I will allow him to fight for himself once. But only once. Otherwise, I won't eat him and will instead give him to you. I believe that will be of some benefit to you." Little Meaty licked her lips. "Then I won't try to persuade you otherwise." Her eyes brightened with anticipation. In the heaven-plucking sect, Qin Yu's lips suddenly twitched after he broke away from his 5 masters. A bitter smile appeared on his pale face. Deep in his eyes, a ruthless and awe-inspiring light appeared. But there was also an irrepressible fear mixed in. Qin Yu was serious. He really did have the thought of giving him to Little Meaty. If he really fell into that person's mouth, no matter how difficult it was to kill him, he would really die. "Pah!" He lifted a hand and slapped his forehead. Qin Yu fell to the ground, wildly rolling back and forth as he howled in anguish. "My life is bitter. My life is really bitter. My fate. Why is it so difficult to cross south?" He flipped over and pointed a finger upwards. "Useless trash. That's right. What are you looking at? I'm talking about you. That was such a good plan, and you could have killed him with your eyes closed. But in the end, you were completely destroyed by that person, and you even suffered a loss in silence. You will have to endure for 30 years before you can speak again. What are you staring at me for? Even if you stare at me, you useless trash." Bang! In the skies above the heaven-plucking sect, a bolt of heavenly thunder appeared out of nowhere. It crashed into Qin Yu's residence and knocked him down. His hair stood on end, and his entire body was scorched black. The members of the heaven-plucking sect hurried over with fear, still lingering in their hearts. They saw Qin Yu flipping over and pointing his middle finger at the skies. "You bastard! If you have the ability, then kill me. Otherwise I will curse you every day." He was full of energy, and his previously dispirited aura had miraculously recovered after being struck by the heavenly thunder. This left the heaven-plucking sect master and the others stunned for a moment. Then they felt gratified. This disciple of theirs was truly talented. However, as they thought of the man and woman in the carriage, they couldn't help but feel a bit gloomy. Just what had Qin Yu handed over? Our heaven-plucking sect Yu-Pu, the future leader of our sect. How could he recognize someone else as his master? Although we agreed not to attack, our heaven-plucking sect has a wide network of friends and connections. Shouldn't we give it a try? After all, we didn't attack, so we didn't go back on our promise. Unfortunately, the young man and woman in the carriage didn't give the heaven-plucking sect a chance to beat around the bush. They circled around the mountain forest several times before their whereabouts were unknown. Even though the heaven-plucking sect used their sect's great array to secretly track them, they still couldn't find them. His whereabouts were still thrown off cleanly. 1,000 Islands Prefecture. The blue waters of the Great Lake stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Countless islands dotted the lake. Although Changdao was long enough, in terms of its landform, it was not eye-catching at all. According to Lord Min, the reason why he chose this island was that the name of this island also happened to have the word long in it. The word long was a good word, especially for a man. Either word was good. That was why he spent a lot of money and signed in the government office of the 1,000 Islands Prefecture. Then this island had a new master. Of course, the one who acted was definitely not Lord Min. He was very experienced in doing such things and would definitely not expose his whereabouts. After all, this time he had abandoned his base in the imperial capital and moved to the 1,000 Islands Prefecture in order to hide from the madam in the Marquis's mansion. The 1,000 Islands Prefecture was still in chaos. Lord Min also chose Changdao. According to him, he could sleep peacefully and work there for hundreds of years without any worries. When the limelight was completely over and he got tired of the rural life, he would move back to the big city and continue to live as a rich man who enjoyed his life in peace. TSK, this was how a happy life was. As for his only son, who was still depressed and hadn't walked out of the pain of love, how many years had it been? Didn't it just mean that my son was a sentimental person? The longer he immersed himself in love, the more he would come back to his senses and let go. Then he would truly be enlightened and wouldn't be troubled by love. This was the advantage of living a long life. He didn't have to worry about wasting his best years and delaying the cultivation of immortality, because my son was born with a long life. Thinking of this, old Masterman was very pleased. Which of those old fogies who bared their fangs at him back then had this ability? Only he could have such a promising son. When Min Xiangtai grew up, the father and son would join forces to cut through gold. Who could stop them? However, Lord Min, who had enjoyed a peaceful life for a few years and ate a bowl of old wontons when he was free, began to lose his wits shortly after he went fishing on the boat today. In the past, he would miss the wontons so much that he would get anxious if he didn't eat them for a day. Even when the slender girls served them to him, he couldn't lift his spirits. After taking a few bites, Lord Min forced a smile. "I'm not feeling well today. I'm going back." The big boat hurried back. The breakfast stall owner, who had now become a member of Lord Min's kitchen, hesitated slightly before bowing. He said softly, "Old master." Min Zhongjing waved his hand. "This has nothing to do with you." He looked up at the sky, his face full of helplessness and sorrow. "I thought that my family's ability to deceive the world was already top-notch, but I still underestimated the heroes of the world. Difficult. It's really too difficult to live." Chef rubbed his hands and said after a long time, "Why don't I ask Big Girl to come over and massage Old Master's shoulders to make you feel better?" Old Master Min glared at him. "If there's nothing else, then scram. Stop talking nonsense here. I'm going to leave Big Girl for Xiangtai." But he couldn't help but linger a little in his eyes. He thought to himself, Min Xiangtai, this little bastard, to be able to reincarnate as my son, he really has accumulated 80,000 lifetimes of good fortune. Chef laughed foolishly. "Whatever you say, old master. I'll get lost then." He left happily. He was in a good mood. If Big Girl could follow young master, that would really be a great fortune. The journey was smooth sailing. The big boat docked at the pier. Old Masterman went ashore with a gloomy face. He immediately saw Go Sheng waiting respectfully at the pier. His face was pale, but there was a hint of unnatural redness. He became more and more skinny, like a thin dog that had been starved for a few years. But his eyes were especially bright, flashing with a light that made one's heart palpitate. Chapter 1635. I'm Go Sheng, a dog under Madam's feet. I took the liberty to come to Changdao today. Please save my life. Go Sheng bowed respectfully and spoke respectfully. Then, in the next moment, he directly fainted. Lord Min's face was livid. He wished he could kill this little bastard who called himself a dog right here and now, so that he wouldn't feel disgusted in front of him. But after thinking about it, he didn't dare to do it. After all, it was up to the master to beat a dog, not to mention the words of the master. This time, he couldn't avoid the eyes of that madam. Even if he was more cautious, he wasn't sure he could avoid it next time. What a sin! Lord Min smiled bitterly and waved his hand. Take this guy home. Be gentle. He's dying. As it turned out, Master Min had overestimated Go Sheng. How could he still have half a breath? He was clearly hanging on by a thread, after being lifted up and tossed around, coupled with the fact that he had relaxed his mind after reaching his destination. He looked like he was about to breathe his last after a few steps. Lord Min was scared and hurriedly asked his servants to put him down. He pinched Go Sheng's philtrum and patted his chest. Seeing that it didn't work, he bit his cheek and took out a small jade bottle. He poured out an elixir and carefully rubbed some powder on the corner of Go Sheng's mouth. This damn, short-lived guy. He should have died long ago. Why did he come to me? Isn't it good to die? He should be reincarnated into a good family in his next life. Feeling indignant and distressed, Lord Min flicked his sleeves and left. The servants hurriedly carried Go Sheng and followed him from a distance. Walking in front of him, Lord Min's eyes were gloomy. Lightning flashed in the depths of his eyes from time to time. Dog's Leftovers, hee, what an amazing name. Thinking of this guy's background and why he ended up like this, Lord Min thought about his name. Thinking about his name, Min Changjing wished he could turn around and slap him into pieces right now. What did that madam want to do? Did she really think that he wouldn't dare to kill her? One day later, Go Sheng woke up. His first words made the gloomy Lord Min break out in a cold sweat on his forehead. Madam deliberately told me to wait a day. Her original words were that if you killed me, she would personally kill your son. Old Master Min was terrified. If Go Sheng was killed, of course, he wouldn't be able to hear this. And if he wasn't prepared, he definitely wouldn't be able to stop that madam. His gaze was like a torch, truly like a torch. The secret that he had hidden for so many years was quietly grasped in his hands. As for that ****starred Go Leftover, he was truly a dog. To think that he wasn't afraid of death and would still do as he was told. Cough. Go Sheng, it's hard for you to recover from your injuries in a short period of time. We still need to think about it in the long run. Old Master Min was sincere. Go Sheng bowed respectfully. Everything will be done as you say. This lowly one has no objections. Western Wilderness, Flowing Light City. As one of the 108 main cities, it was famous for producing a special construction material called the flowing light tile. Under the sunlight, this kind of tile could reflect a myriad of splendor, but its true use was naturally not just to look good. The flowing light tile could gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and use it to pave the roof. It was naturally a spirit-gathering formation and was the favorite item of high-class immortals and rich families. It could show off their family's foundation. Simply put, this thing had a high status. Therefore, even if it had the same effect, the cost was several times higher than ordinary spirit-gathering formations. But it was still extremely popular and was even sold as far as the Eastern Wilderness. Because of its wealth, the scale of the Flowing Light City's transmission formation was particularly large. The soldiers stationed there were all in shiny armor, and the weapons in their hands emitted a cold aura. With one glance, one could tell that it was an extraordinary item. According to the words of the old people of Flowing Light City, in terms of face, the several lords of Flowing Light City were all the ancestors of this path. Otherwise, they would not be able to sell the flowing light tiles at such a sky-high price and not worry about the market at all. Next to the transmission formation of the imperial capital, now there was a group of people waiting. Most of them were silent, but their bearing and bearing were extraordinary. After all, not to mention the cost of entering the imperial capital's transmission formation. Just the right to use it was enough to make many people shrink back. Even so, a routine inspection was essential, and it was also extremely strict. Greetings to the three of you. Are you all here together? The soldier responsible for inspecting them asked with a smile. His attitude was very good. Qin Yu nodded. That's right. My wife and my wife's maid. The soldier's attitude became increasingly gentle. Here are your proof of identity. He took it and carefully looked over it. There was no problem. His eyes fell on Baiji. Old Master Qin, there is no problem with your proof of identity. But, according to the rules, those who enter the imperial capital's transmission formation must reveal their true appearance. This wasn't a major matter. Qin Yu had already intended to have Baiji pull down her white veil. But at this moment there was a sneer from the side. Sir, there is a lowly maid next to you, and she still has a white veil covering her face. Isn't it a bit inappropriate for my wife to take off her veil first? The one who glanced over was a young sir. He wore embroidered robes and held a folding fan in his hands. Overbearing and arrogant, although he called himself sir, there was no respect in his tone at all. Qin Yu frowned. Before entering the transmission formation area to wait, the two of them had met face to face. At that time, this young sir's attitude was gentle and polite. Compared to now, it could be called the difference between the heavens and earth. But when he was repeatedly refused by little Meaty Side, his expression began to darken. If it weren't for the fact that this person didn't dare to act recklessly in the teleportation formation, the few strong and muscular bodyguards beside him would have long since made their move. Qin Yu had experienced the power of the words femme fatale. He didn't want to meddle in this matter, but this person had provoked him on his own initiative. Looking at little Meaty's complexion, he felt that it was better for him to step forward. Otherwise, a minor matter could easily turn into a major matter and ruin his original plan. Although he wasn't afraid, it would only delay him. Qin Yu turned around, his expression calm and his eyes calm. "Young sir, when you go out, have the elders of your family not told you not to be too arrogant? Otherwise, there might come a day when you might lose your life. Why waste the good eyesight of your reincarnation?" Across from him, the young sir in luxurious robes, who was covered by his gaze, paled. His eyes widened, revealing endless panic. It was like he had been forcefully dragged into a nightmare. Insolence! How bold! Several bodyguards were enraged. How could they not know that their young master had fallen into someone's scheme? They roared out and were about to attack, but before they could even move, they felt as if they had suffered a heavy blow. With stuffy coughs, they were forcefully suppressed where they stood, unable to move at all. Their eyes widened in horror. The guard of Flowing Light City's transmission formation was a man with keen eyesight. He hurriedly rushed over and glanced at Qin Yu. He smiled and said, "My lord, please calm your anger. You should know that it is strictly forbidden to fight in the transmission formation area. Otherwise the laws will not tolerate it." Qin Yu faintly smiled and took a step back. "This Lord General is right. When you are outside, it is best to abide by the laws." As he stepped back, the several people across from him felt as if they had been granted amnesty. The young sir in luxurious robes gasped for breath, awe in his eyes. But Qin, you could still sense a trace of hatred deep in his eyes. It seemed that these people all had decent backgrounds. He hesitated for a moment, but didn't do anything. They even dared to enter the western wasteland imperial capital. So how could they fear a mere youth? The Flowing Light City guard laughed. He cupped his hands together and said, "My lord is right. If everyone could be as magnanimous as you, we would be much more comfortable." He waved his hand and ordered several high-grade flowing light tiles to be brought over. These weren't the kind used to pave roofs, but rather were finely processed ornaments. Ordinary nobles liked to place one or two of them in their study and use them as lighting fixtures. According to the words of our city lord, this is called further processing and then selling it. It is a way to earn even more profit. Although they didn't understand, it really was a great profit. There were several companies in the city that were engaged in the deep processing of flowing light tiles, treating the city lord as a living bodhisattva. It was said that if it weren't for the city lord's stern refusal, a memorial tablet would have been erected in their temple. It isn't too expensive. It is just a little local product. I would like to give it to my lord's maid as a token of our appreciation. Qin Yu glanced at this guard who knew how to conduct himself. He smiled and nodded. "That's also good." "Then accept it." Baiji respectfully nodded. She stepped forward and received the flowing light tile, casually putting it away. The guard didn't exchange any pleasantries. After a few words, he turned and left. Not long after he left, the transmission array was ready. Qin Yu and the others cut in line, but no one had any objections to this. The pale-faced young master in luxurious robes lowered his head and followed in. This caused many people's eyes to brighten. They thought that if they moved a bit faster, they might be able to catch a good show. The transmission array lit up and the figures of everyone vanished from sight. The guard watched this from afar. At this moment, his complexion relaxed and he let out a long breath. "General, who was that just now? Ruler realm." The guard bitterly smiled. He rubbed his face. Those big shots. Why did they have to pretend to be commoners? Fortunately, this person has a more gentle personality. Otherwise, something might have happened. Hiss! Several people nearby sucked in a breath of cold air. But from what I see, that noble young master doesn't seem like he wants to keep the peace. Just a moment ago, he went with him. The guard shook his head. The imperial capital is deep and not something our flowing light city can compare with. Since he isn't afraid, he must have some sort of confidence. But this has nothing to do with us. We just need to send him away. Whether or not there's a bloody fight afterwards, that's up to them. Everyone praised the general's wisdom for smoothing things out ahead of time and sending away this group of gods of plague, preventing any complications from occurring. The guard was expressionless, but he knew in his heart that this lord didn't seem like an ordinary ruler. In terms of sensing auras, he had always been extremely sensitive. Although he didn't discover anything special, he felt that this person was stronger than the city lords. No, it was more accurate to say that he was much stronger. It seemed that this noble young master from the imperial capital was willing to bow his head and admit defeat. But if he wanted to get back at them, he feared that if he wasn't careful, he would stir up a great deal of trouble. In fact, while it was true that he wanted to get back at them, there wasn't much trouble. This was because after Qin Yu left the transmission array and arrived in the capital region, he went straight to find the guard general guarding the transmission array and showed him the token in his hand. This token couldn't indicate one's identity, but it meant that behind this person was at least a great general, and he had a massive army under his command. Please wait a moment. I will immediately pass on the message. The guard respectfully bowed and didn't dare to delay. He turned and hurried away. There was the sound of breaking air, and two figures arrived together. One of them could be considered the first person Qin Yu had met in the western wilderness. He was General Yi Qin from the old Yi family. The one beside him was likely the other newly promoted general of the imperial capital's guard. He was an unfamiliar face. Seeing this from afar, the young master in luxurious robes who was waiting not too far away had a pale complexion. He didn't dare to have any more thoughts. He bowed from afar and left in a hurry. What nonsense! He had casually flashed a token, and two generals of the imperial capital's guard had rushed over. Was such a character someone easy to provoke? A soft persimmon was easy to pinch, but something like an iron plate was an idiot who kicked it. Yi Qin landed on the ground. He said in a low voice, "Who are you? Why do you have a military token in your hand and want me to come here to speak?" Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out an item. "I asked General Yi Qin to bring this item to see His Majesty. Tell him that this sinner doesn't dare to enter the palace without permission and is waiting here." He waved his hand. General Yi Qin should not ask anything else. There are some things you need to know that knowing too much isn't necessarily a good thing. Yi Qin's complexion changed. He looked at the military token and then at the flowing lights. It was clear this wasn't an ordinary artifact. He took a deep breath and said, "All right." After receiving it, he shot into the skies and flew straight towards the imperial palace. Chapter 1636. Zhou Ming, the great eunuch who served His Majesty, had committed some sort of crime and was disliked by His Majesty. These past few years, his life had been deteriorating with each passing day. If it weren't for the fact that he was well behaved in his early years and had some connections in the palace, he likely wouldn't have lasted until now and would have died long ago. In the past, this great eunuch was so prestigious that even the high officials of the imperial capital had to greet him with a smile. But now he was doing the task of sweeping the imperial roads. His body was stooped and he wore an old black cotton robe. After the cuffs were stained with oil, they were polished black and shiny. It wasn't easy for him to finish today's cleaning work. As Zhou Ming hugged the broom and gasped for breath, he suddenly heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Many people were madly running towards him. Zhou Ming's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly lowered his head and retreated to the side. The rules of the palace were very strict. For such a commotion to occur, It was clear that something major had happened. With his current status, he was like a bug in the palace. If he didn't hide far away, he would die for nothing if he was trampled to death. But what happened soon made Zhou Ming feel as if he were in a dream. His lips trembled and his eyes widened. He didn't know what to say. "Godfather, what are you standing there for? His Majesty has ordered you to wash up and change your clothes to quickly wait outside the study. This time, you've really had a sweet time. In the future, let's see if anyone in the palace dares to look down on you." Surrounded by smiling faces, Zhou Ming returned to his original residence in the palace. He took a hot bath, which he hadn't had for a long time, and changed into the standard robe of a eunuch. When he arrived outside the study, Zhou Ming was still in a daze. "Oh, Eunuch Zhou Ming, you're here? His Majesty is inside and has been waiting for a long time. Hurry in and let us brothers drink and reminisce in the future." A great eunuch he was acquainted with in the past smiled and spoke from afar, but Zhou Ming could see that there was a curious look in his eyes. He couldn't understand how someone like him who had been stuck in the mud for several years could suddenly turn things around. But in truth, Zhou Ming didn't know either. This was why he was suddenly rejected and suppressed, and this was also why he was suddenly revived today. Taking a deep breath, Zhou Ming tried to appear calm. "I'll go see His Majesty first." After reporting, Zhou Ming bowed and quickly walked in with a heart filled with awe and apprehension. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. "Slave, Zhou Ming greets your Majesty." On the 9th floor, the Emperor of the West Wilderness put down the memorial and looked at him. "From today onwards, you will continue to serve the Emperor." That was all. The great Emperor didn't give an explanation. From His Majesty's point of view, there was no need to waste time. After all, the eunuchs in the palace were all servants of the royal family. Their life and death, honor and disgrace were all in his hands. Was he supposed to apologize for all these years? If he really did it, Zhou Ming Kai would be scared half to death. This was the sorrow of the weak, not to mention the unpredictable rise and fall of their lives. Even after the ups and downs, they still couldn't figure it out. Naturally, Zhou Ming would never have imagined that the reason why he was banished all those years ago and the sudden turnaround today were all because of the same person. And this person had already secretly met with the great Emperor of the West Wilderness and told him that he had no choice but to commit the crime of deceiving the sovereign from the very start. The specific details and process were extremely complicated and the evidence was clear. The general summary was, after he killed the true ruler of darkness, because he yearned for the higher realm's desolate region, he impulsively impersonated someone else. In addition to his ignorance, he committed a grave mistake and ruined the West Wilderness plans in the broken world. Because of this, he didn't dare to reveal his identity. Afterwards, he was highly regarded by His Majesty and was promoted all the way to a high position. However, his heart was always anxious and restless. Now that he was plotted against and killed, he thought about it over and over again and changed his ways. He was willing to confess everything to His Majesty and ask His Majesty to be magnanimous and give him a chance to atone for his crimes. This was indeed a risk, but it wasn't because he was completely unprepared. In the capital region, he used the tiger seal to mobilize troops to ask for Yi Qin's help. Of course, this wasn't some sinner's heart was filled with fear, but rather it was to give himself some leeway. If things really went wrong, he could follow Medes' plan and leave the Western Wilderness imperial capital, abandoning his identity as the Marquis of Loyal Marshal. This matter was placed in the open. As the saying goes, first a villain, then a gentleman. If the great Emperor of the West Wilderness could see this, he would be more willing to believe Qin Yu's story. This was related to the calculation of the human heart. It was an open and above-board plot, so there was no need to worry that it would backfire. Of course, the most important reason the great emperor believed this was because Qin Yu's confession was true and could withstand any investigation or scrutiny. It also coincided with a mystery that had always existed in the depths of the great emperor's heart. For instance, Why did the crazed Li Siji bite the Marquis of Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, to death in the cage? His failure and his current situation were all thanks to Ning Qin. If Ning Qin wanted him dead, then it was normal for him to do so. If it were anyone else that dared to commit such a great crime of deceiving the heavens and deceiving the emperor, the great emperor would have already slapped them to death. But for Qin Yu, he was willing to listen and think about it. He was even willing to play the little tricks he had played before. He was willing to tolerate it. After all, a living Marquis of Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, was far more useful than a corpse, especially in the current situation. According to what Qin Yu said, everything that had happened to him in the borders of the Goliaths was all because of that race. Because of their meticulous planning, they had caused him to die once. There was a great terror between life and death. The reason the Western Wilderness Great Emperor was willing to believe Qin Yu was because he could feel an aura of death that hadn't yet faded from his body. He used the destiny of the nation to support himself and borrow the power of the heavenly Tao to ask questions. If so, it wasn't difficult to borrow a pair of all-seeing eyes. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't fully understand what was involved in reviving from the dead, but he knew that Qin Yu must have suffered a great loss because of it. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't believe a single word of it. At most, they were just using each other. Qin Yu wanted to borrow the strength of the Western Wilderness to take revenge on that race. According to what he said, he had lost half of his destiny in this life and death situation, and this thing was incomparably important to him. If he couldn't take it back, all that awaited him in the future was death. That's right, regarding this plot, Qin Yu had used Little Meaty's reminder as a reference to Li Ruhua's matter. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't easily believe this, but in the state of the all-seeing eye, he could see that there was indeed a remnant destiny on Qin Yu's body. It was weak, but it was also filled with a violent backlash. In the past, the last wisp of bloodline from the heavenly bull's horn had fused with Qin Yu, forming the reverse momentum of the 9 nethers swallowing the heavens. After the little blue lamp concealed itself, no one could see it. Then it retracted its strength, allowing the Western Wilderness Great Emperor to see everything clearly. He didn't know what had happened, but he took it for granted that it was a change in Qin Yu's destiny after reviving from the dead. The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't know the root cause, but he could faintly feel that the current Qin Yu and that race were as incompatible as fire and water. When Qin Yu said that he had been plotted against by that race and that half of his destiny had been taken away, it was completely consistent with this. Moreover, that race had relied on seizing destiny to rise to where they were today, so it was normal for them to do such things. Of course, the most important point was that the Western Wilderness Great Emperor had seen how the Four Claws had destroyed the Stone God tribe's totem godstone in the past. From then on, he could see that the one who had plotted to kill Marquis Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, was indeed that race. All of this could be used as evidence to form a complete chain of evidence. In addition to what he saw with his own eyes, the Western Wilderness Great Emperor finally believed what Qin Yu had said. He agreed to forgive everything that had happened in the past, and that from now on, he and his subjects would be of one mind and one heart. Otherwise, what would have been waiting for Zhou Ming wouldn't have happened today. Instead, he feared he would have lost his head without even knowing why. However, this was called being of one heart and one mind. It was fine if he just listened. The great emperor felt that he had gained a much deeper understanding of Qin Yu's roots. As long as he put in some effort, it wouldn't be difficult to control Qin Yu. Before Qin Yu left the imperial capital, after the ruler and minister reached a consensus, he didn't forget to ask the Western Wasteland Great Emperor for several treasures from the palace storehouse in order to conceal his aura. This could be considered as covering up a seemingly inconspicuous but extremely critical flaw on his body. Zhou Ming happily left. After obtaining the Western Wilderness Great Emperor's personal promise, there was nothing more reassuring than this. As for the reason or explanation, he didn't think it was important. As long as he could live a happy and comfortable life, the truth wasn't important. Being a muddle-headed person wasn't necessarily a bad decision. Minor characters also had their own philosophy of survival. Regardless of whether they were sad or not, they always had their own reasons. The little eunuch, Li Shouqing, walked out from the shadows. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Qin Yu has already left the imperial capital." The Western Wilderness Great Emperor thought for a moment. He slowly said, "What do you think of this person?" Li Shouqing furrowed his eyebrows for several breaths of time. He bowed and said, "I think that, at least from the current situation, Qin Yu is worthy of your Majesty's trust." The Western Wilderness Great Emperor didn't speak. He simply waved his hand. Li Shouqing turned and drew back, vanishing into the shadows. He lifted a hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. Then he took a step forwards and vanished from sight. In the next moment he arrived at the imperial palace. Within the Thunder Pool prison, his eyes were as calm as a great lake, without the least bit of ripples. 2 hours later, accompanied by the endless roars of thunder, the Western Wilderness Great Emperor left the Thunder Pool. It was unknown what he had done or what sort of answer he had obtained from Li Siji, but his complexion was much more relaxed than before. It was just that he didn't see Li Siji, who was covered in wounds and gasping for breath in the Thunder Pool. Li Siji's eyes were blood red and filled with a gloomy coldness. If one were close enough and carefully looked into his eyes, they could faintly see that in the depths of his eyes there was a faint crescent moon hidden within. A carriage quietly drove down the road. The driver, Baiji, was still as striking as ever. Qin Yu rubbed between his eyebrows. He slowly said, "Concerning my confession, how much do you think the Western Wilderness Great Emperor believed me in the end?" Little Meat thought for a moment. "Around 7 to 8. Qin Yu nodded. "I also think so. That should be enough for now." He took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. "Now shall we move?" "Let's go somewhere first." Little Meat's lips curled up in a taunting smile. "Since I've found you, you should put in some effort." Qin Yu didn't understand, but seeing that Little Meat had no intention of explaining, he didn't ask. After all, the two of them had truly gone through life and death together. He closed his eyes and began to cultivate. The countdown to 30 years had begun the moment he woke up. Now, in Qin Yu's eyes, every breath of time, every second was precious. If he didn't want to die a miserable death, he could only do his best. Little Meat glanced at Qin Yu, who had entered a state of cultivation. Her lips curved up in a smile before she composed herself. Matters in the imperial capital weren't as simple as they seemed. When Qin Yu went to see the Western Wilderness Great Emperor, she hadn't been idling around. When she was in the imperial capital, she had faintly sensed that something was wrong, and now she finally discovered it. As for the reason that other party dared to come into contact with her, it was likely because it had sensed her current condition. Otherwise, even if it had 100 times more courage, it still wouldn't have dared to show itself. Both sides had their own needs, so they reached an agreement. As for the Western Wilderness Great Emperor, after dealing with a few more waves, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Thinking this, Little Meat licked the corners of her lips. This was because, when it came to things that were old enough, she simply didn't have any resistance. As for the one hiding in the thunder pond of the imperial palace, it was bright red and looked extremely delicious. She reached out a hand, and a tree branch came forward on its own initiative. She casually poked it and drank several mouthfuls. She thought that, with her current state, could it be that she didn't even have the ability to eat a meal? She couldn't help but feel a bit sad. When she looked at Qin Yu again, he seemed like an eyesore. Hiss! Qin Yu shivered and sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes flashed open. "What is it?" Little Meat coldly sneered. "It's nothing." Qin Yu shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. He was too lazy to think about why she had suddenly gone crazy. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. Central Wasteland, Divine Continent. 13th floor. As the highest mountain peak of the world, the 13th floor was known as the only way to step into the highest heavens and reach the white jade capital. It was a place that countless cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. Today, the Li family's third-generation direct descendant, Li Ruhua, officially entered the 13th floor and began a new life of cultivation. There was something that greatly surpassed the Li family's expectations. Before Li Ruhua left for the 13th floor, she had already been granted the status of a family elder. For a time, she became even more dazzling. Junior apprentice Sister Li, I have been waiting for you here on the orders of the Tower Master. High in the heavens, a mountain peak broke through the clouds. The sunlight above was as bright as gold, illuminating the sea of clouds for 10,000 miles. The disciple of the 13th floor, Mingzhe, smiled and said. He was handsome and had an extraordinary bearing. Li Ruhua bowed. I'll have to trouble senior apprentice, Brother Ming. Mingzhe was one of the 10 strongest people in the world below the Emperor realm. He was ranked third. He had once fought with an Emperor realm expert and was able to escape unscathed. It was rumored that he was still hiding his true strength and had the qualifications to contend for first place. Even Li Ruhua didn't dare show the slightest bit of disrespect in front of this seemingly gentle and calm young man. The so-called 10 strongest people below the Emperor realm were only half a step away from leaping through the Dragon's Gate. In fact, due to their aptitude and foundation, their status was no less than that of a half-step emperor. Mingzhe's gaze fell on the person beside Li Ruhua. He hesitated for a moment and said slowly, Junior apprentice Sister Li, every disciple of the 13th floor is qualified to bring a servant with them. They will be our best helpers on our path of cultivation in the future. His words were vague, but Li Ruhua understood his meaning. She bowed and said, I understand Senior Brother Ming's good intentions, but he is indeed my best choice. Your honey is my arsenic. You may see him as a stubborn rock, but I see him as an unpolished jade. There were many similar situations in the world of cultivation. After all, everyone's fortunes and encounters were different. Mingzhe cupped his hands. I have been presumptuous. Please forgive me, junior sister. He smiled faintly and waved his sleeves. Then let's go. The sea of clouds parted with a wave of his sleeve, revealing a flight of stairs leading to the heavens. Mingzhe led the way, and Li Ruhua followed behind him. The one who she had insisted on choosing as her servant, despite the objections of her family, was Chun Shanglu of Guanhai City, whose family had been wiped out. He was currently submissive and didn't dare to reveal anything, but there was a trace of emotion in the depths of his eyes. Father, can you see this in the heavens? Your son is currently walking on the stairway leading to the 13th floor. Mingzhe turned his head and glanced at Qin Shanglu, then at the calm Li Ruhua. He seemed to be deep in thought. Chapter 1637. Magpies chirped in the branches. According to old Masterman, an honored guest was coming to visit. He ordered the steward to bring servants to carefully clean up the courtyard and sprinkle water on the roads. He changed into a new set of rich and noble robes and personally went to the pier to greet them. The steward nodded again and again. He led the servants into a busy state, but he couldn't help but mutter inwardly, just where did this honored guest come from that the old master would care so much about him? Could it be that the old man from the young master's mother's side was angry that the old master had stolen away his precious grandson without even informing him? So he came to visit in a fit of rage? But the old master had clearly said that in order to prevent the old man from rushing about, he would first hide where he would be staying from the old man. Once everything was settled, he would take the initiative to apologize to old Taishan. The young master had also agreed to this matter. He personally wrote a letter to appease the old man's mood. He had personally delivered the letter, but the old master was worried and had secretly opened it to see if there were any problems. The steward shook his head and decided not to think too much about it. Just what sort of person was his old master? All he needed to do was listen to orders. On the pier, old Masterman stood facing the wind, a smile on his face as he faced the Great Lake. But right now it was like he was chewing on a piece of top-quality gold thread. The taste could be imagined. He had lived for so many years, but even when he was forced out of his home by a group of old bastards, he had never felt so aggrieved. At the very least, those old bastards had lost several teeth. Moreover, he had already bowed his head in the imperial capital. If he continued to act so shamelessly, wouldn't he become nothing more than a puppet in the hands of that madam? This was going too far. Cough! Although he wasn't a human, his methods were still going too far. Old Masterman smiled and clenched his teeth. He had to make things clear today. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered. He had to let that madam know that he wasn't some soft dough. A ship sailed over from afar. Masterman, who was filled with hatred, hurriedly took 2 steps forward. A smile immediately blossomed on his aged face. The ship slowed down and slowly docked at the pier. Old Masterman waved his hand as he looked at the 3 people walking out. "Marquis, madam, I have been waiting here for a long time. I welcome the arrival of 2 honored guests." Qin Yu had a calm expression, but he actually felt a bit strange in his heart. He hadn't interacted with this old man in the imperial capital, but right now he was clearly an ordinary person without the slightest bit of the aura of a cultivator leaking out from him. However, an ordinary person clearly did not have the qualifications to become the master of an island in the Thousand Islands County. It was even more impossible for little Meaty to remember him. Therefore, the more ordinary he looked on the surface, the more extraordinary he was in reality. This old Masterman was definitely a powerful character. Seeing that little Meaty had no intention of speaking, Qin Yu smiled and cupped his hands across his chest. "I took the liberty to come here and disturb your peace. I hope you don't blame me." Lord Min's smile grew brighter. "Marquis, you're flattering me. It's our great honor that you and your wife can come to Changdao." He observed Ruru's expression and saw her frown. His heart shivered and he immediately gestured with his hand. "It's windy outside. We've already prepared some simple refreshments at home. I hope Marquis and Madam don't mind." Qin Yu nodded. "Thank you for your hospitality." The master and servant disembarked from the ship. A servant had already prepared a carriage for them. After boarding the carriage, the journey was smooth and they soon arrived at the new residence. The scale was large and the courtyard was imposing. After Qin Yu left the carriage, he couldn't help but take several glances at it. Lord Min said, "This is a remote courtyard in the countryside. Besides taking up a bit more space, there isn't anything exquisite about it. I've embarrassed myself in front of Marquis." Qin Yu smiled. "Lord Min is too modest. This residence of yours is quite good, at the very least. At least, it is far better than my residence in the imperial capital." Sensing his aura, he could feel that the great heaven and earth net was extremely lax in restraining this residence in front of him. This was more like a form of tacit understanding and respect. The meaning behind it was clear. Old Masterman was wearing a common Laoguai-style robe. It looked very rich and noble, but in reality it was unfathomable. "Marquis, you praise me too much." Old Man Min glanced over, feeling somewhat bewildered. How could a mere early-stage ruler be able to see through the depths of his courtyard? But thinking about it, if Marquis Zhongwu could be this madam's man, cough, cough, even if it was only a name, how could he be an ordinary person? If he had this ability, then it was normal. "Marquis, madam, please." After sweeping it clean, the residence seemed even more tranquil and beautiful. As they walked down the stone-paved path, they could see a brilliant and vibrant scene in the distance. Seeing Qin Yu look over, Lord Min smiled. "These are flowing light tiles produced in our western desolate flowing light city. They are a bit expensive, but they do look beautiful. Marquis and Madam's residence is in that courtyard covered in flowing light tiles. At night, when the stars shine down, it is a completely different scene." As he spoke, he led the way. Lord Min was calm and collected, his words extremely humorous and humorous. From start to finish, little Meaty maintained an expressionless face. It was only that the corners of her lips would occasionally curve up in a heart-shaking sneer. Of course, the one who was frightened was Lord Min. Before this, he thought he had seen through the madam's problem, but now that he saw her, he didn't feel too sure. As to what choice to make, his heart was tangled. After all, he only had a single son. They entered the living room and sat down. There were already maids that had prepared refreshments. The tea wasn't ordinary. It must have been produced from a top immortal tea tree. Unexpectedly, the pastries were also very delicious. For Chinyu, who had tasted the cooking of the root man, to give a very delicious evaluation was already commendable. Little Meaty suddenly said, "These pastries are quite good. They should be rewarded." Lord Min hesitated for a moment. He smiled. "Since Madame says they should be rewarded, then call the chef over to personally thank Madame. This can also be considered a blessing for him." He waved his hand, and naturally the servants left in a hurry. Soon, the owner of the breakfast stall, who had left the imperial capital with him for some reason and became a part of his master's small kitchen, appeared in the living room. He looked like an honest man. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat, and he was still panting in his white apron. He constantly rubbed his hands, as if he was at a loss for what to do when he was suddenly called. "Ah, Lai, Marquis Zhongwu's wife likes your pastries. She called you over to receive her reward. Hurry up and kowtow." The old chef named Lai's face flushed red. He hurriedly knelt down and respectfully kowtowed. "Thank you, madam, for the reward." Baiji walked out and placed a stone in his hand. This stone was one of the fragments of the totem god stone from the stone god tribe. It was worth a small amount of money. The old chef's face turned even redder. He looked at his master as if he was holding a red-hot soldering iron. He didn't know whether to accept it or not. Lord Min pondered for a moment and smiled. "Since it's Madame's reward for you, then accept it. Also, kowtow to Madame." "There's no need to kowtow," Little Meaty said lightly, her eyes bright. "I like the pastries you make very much. Are you willing to leave with me?" "Don't worry. I will naturally give Lord Min a very generous ransom. I won't let him suffer a loss. As for whether you agree or not." She looked up and smiled. "I think Lord Min won't refuse for a chef. For my sake." Lord Min smiled bitterly and said without hesitation, "Madam, what are you talking about? It's this chef's blessing that you like him. I'll lie. From today onwards, you're no longer a chef in our house. You can go anywhere you want." The old chef's face paled. He waved his hands. "Master, I've received a great favor from you, and I haven't repaid it. I won't go anywhere in this life. If you don't want me to be your chef, then I'll go back to my old profession. I'll borrow a piece of land on this island and set up a stall." He looked at Little Meaty and said carefully, "Madam, it's indeed my blessing that you like my cooking. I didn't know how to appreciate your kindness. If you want to beat me or kill me, you can do as you please." Little Meaty lowered her head and looked at the chef kneeling in front of her. "You really don't agree? Your master knows that I have a bad temper. Since you said you can do as you please, don't regret it when the time comes." Lord Min's expression changed. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything. The old chef said firmly, "I won't regret it. I'm willing to accept your punishment." Baiji's eyes flashed with a cold light. In her opinion, it was this old chef's great fortune to be valued by the madam. He actually dared to reject the madam. He deserved to die. Little Meaty glanced at her and waved her hand. "If you don't want to, then forget it. Just pretend that we don't have the fortune to eat good food." Her words had a double meaning. Lord Min's forehead broke out in cold sweat. He felt more and more uncertain. "I'm a little tired. Arrange for someone to bring us to rest." Little Meaty stood up and spoke. Her face was expressionless and her voice was cold. Qin, you didn't think that he had lost face because of this. After all, he knew that if it wasn't for little Meaty, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to walk into this living room and sit down for a cup of tea. However, when it came to something like face, it was better to leave some. If it was too stiff, it wouldn't be a good thing. Then I'll have to trouble Lord Min. Lord Min's face was full of smiles. It's my duty. Servants, bring the Marquis and the Madam to rest. We will definitely serve them well. After the three of them left, Min Chongjing wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and sat back in his chair. He picked up his teacup and drank it in 2 mouthfuls. He glared at old Chef, who was still kneeling on the ground. You've got guts. The old chef reached out a hand. Master, I'll have to trouble you to help me. My legs are soft and I can't get up. Min Chongjing sneered. If you can't get up, then kneel. Right now my legs are also soft. He really was a little afraid. Just now, the living room seemed calm and tranquil, but the truth was a turbulent undercurrent. Although the Marquise Madam was sitting motionless, the way she looked at the two of them was as if she was staring at a piece of fat meat in a bowl. It was as if in the next moment a pair of chopsticks would reach out and grab the two's vital points. Then she would send it into her mouth and chew on it. Soft and delicious, the living room quieted down. After a long time, the old chef crawled up, his face pale. Master, how did you provoke this madam? His words nearly caused Min Chongjing to jump up and curse. How did I provoke her grandmother? In all honesty, this was really like a pot falling from the sky when I was sitting at home. I've already abandoned my family and business and ran all the way from the imperial capital to this wilderness. But this madam still refuses to let go. What can I do? When he thought of the cause of this matter, it was because of that 9-tailed fox. Min Chongjing gritted his teeth in hatred. Damn it! I really have a natural conflict with the demon race. If he could do it all over again, he would never talk about the old relationship. He would slap that coquettish fox to death and get rid of all the evidence. Chapter 1638. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Otherwise, old Masterman would have bought hundreds of them and eaten them like jelly beans. Old Chef knew he had said something wrong when he saw his master gritting his teeth, his face full of anger. He quickly slapped himself. My mouth just doesn't know how to speak. Master, don't be angry. Otherwise, why don't you kick me a few times to calm down? Get lost. Old Master Min shouted. Go back to your kitchen and don't come out for a few days. If that person asks for it again, I don't want to continue living in fear. Old Chef hurriedly nodded. Yes, I'll go back now and never show my face again. He hesitated for a while and whispered, But this matter, are we just going to let it go? Old Master, that's not what you said before. Min Chongjing did not get angry. The corner of his mouth twitched. He slowly said, I have a feeling that things are not so simple. Let's wait and see. Well, it's good to be safe. I'll take my leave then. Old Chef respectfully bowed and walked out of the living room. When he returned to the kitchen, he waved his hand to tell his daughter not to worry. He said he was tired and wanted to rest alone. After his daughter left, he casually prepared 2 side dishes to go with the wine, a plate of pickled cucumbers and a plate of fragrant fried peanuts. He opened a pot of coarse wine that the servants in the mansion drank and began to eat and drink with relish. His expression was calm. There was no trace of his previous cowardice. Although he was still stooped, he naturally gave people a majestic aura that was as immovable as a mountain. Old Chef finished drinking and eating. He casually cleaned up and poured himself a cup of tea. His eyes swept around leisurely. Right at this moment, a loud bang resounded, and the door let out a blood-curdling scream. It almost died on the spot. Old Chef suddenly stood up with a panicked face. Old Master, what's wrong with you? Min Chongjing's face was gloomy. He looked around the room and smelled the lingering smell of alcohol in the air. He expressionlessly said, Oh, you drank? and also ate a plate of pickled cucumbers. Unfortunately, the fried peanuts are a little overcooked. Although they are fragrant, they are slightly bitter. Old Chef dryly laughed. Old Master, you are very observant. Before he could finish his words, he was kicked to the ground. Min Chongjing did not feel relieved after the kick. He rushed over and gave Old Chef another round of kicks. Bastard, bastard, what are you trying to do? If you want to die, don't drag us down with you. I'm telling you, Old Master only has one son. Nothing must happen to him. Not even a single hair is allowed to fall. You better behave yourself and take back all your thoughts. Otherwise, I'll break your 3 legs and make you unable to be a man for the rest of your life. As he scolded and kicked, the kitchen was filled with loud bangs. The girl with the long braid who was guarding outside the door nodded her head vigorously as she felt sorry for him. She thought to herself, Master, it's best if you use more force to prevent Father from having that kind of idea again. The best would be to really break his legs so that he could lie on the bed. However, 2 would be enough. After she left, she was still thinking of finding a companion for her father so that he wouldn't have a miserable life in his old age. It wouldn't be good for him to become a widow. In the distance, a group of servants hid and peeked, listening to the movements in the kitchen. Then looking at the beautiful maid at the door, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva, their faces slightly pale. In their hearts, they thought that Old Chef's daughter was really pretty, but her heart was too cruel. She could even do such a thing to her own father. If it were them, what would happen to them? All right, they should stay far away from her in the future. Don't ever have any ideas that you shouldn't have. Otherwise, you might die one day. The kitchen finally quieted down. Min Zhongjing panted and pulled a chair to sit down. His face was still ashen. Say, do you understand? No. Old Chef, who was curled up, raised his head pitifully, revealing his swollen face. I understand. Old Master, please calm down. Did you hurt yourself? It's all my fault. I'm already so old, but my bones are still so hard. It's a big sin to hurt you, he said with a face full of shame. Old Master Min couldn't help but raise his head and sigh. He really wanted to rush out and give him another beating. You think you're awesome because your bones are strong? Why don't you look at the situation? What are you showing off for? He took a deep breath and exhaled. Min Zhongjing stared into his eyes. Listen to me on this matter. Before I say anything, you can't do anything. Otherwise, that precious daughter of yours can forget about being the legal wife of my son. At most, she'll be a concubine. Humph, you know the rules of our family. I don't need to explain the difference between a legal wife and a concubine, right? Old Chef widened his eyes pitifully. Old Master, please don't. We've already agreed on it. How can you change it just like that? He looked pleading and kept looking at the door. Old Master Min sneered. I'm the Old Master. I can change it if I want to. What can you do about it? He flicked his sleeves and walked away angrily. He thought to himself, if it weren't for the sensible little girl who quickly informed me, you would have ruined my plan. That, madam, if you could really do anything, I would have let you die. But this matter, it's not that simple. The door closed and opened again. This time, it was the little girl who came in. A few years had passed, but she still had her black braids and her figure was even more curvaceous. She looked at her father quietly with a faint look in her eyes. She said softly, I heard what Old Master said. If you spoil my marriage and turn me from a legal wife to a concubine, even if you're my biological father, you won't be able to talk to me. Old Chef's face was full of grief and indignation. Stupid girl, don't you see how I look now? You're still standing there saying such heartless words. The little girl sneered. Father, I'll call you father again. But if you continue to play dumb, I'm not sure what you'll say next. Old Chef looked up to the sky and sighed. Good. I won't mess around, all right? When a girl is of age, she can't be kept at home. She'll always side with outsiders. The ancients were right. The little girl blushed and walked over to pull Old Chef up. "Father, I'm doing this for your own good." Old Chef's eyes widened, but before he could react, he heard two crisp, cracking sounds. His whole body fell to the ground with a thud. Both of his thighs had been kicked so cleanly that his bones and tendons had been broken. He pointed at his daughter with a trembling hand. His lips moved a few times, but he couldn't bear to scold her. The little girl knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. "Father, I don't want you to die, and I don't want to spoil my marriage. I can only let you suffer a little. When that madam leaves, I'll listen to you." Old Masterman, who had already walked far away, suddenly twitched his mouth twice. He turned his head to look at the kitchen. He thought to himself, "This lass has a good temperament. She can even kill her own father. Our future head of the household must have this kind of decisive temperament." This time he could really rest assured. He turned around and walked a few more steps. Old Masterman couldn't help but rub his chin. He thought to himself, "Maybe I should restrain my gaze from now on." The little girl was all grown up. If she held a grudge or something, his old arms and legs might not be able to bear it. The effect of the flowing light tile was not just for show. In Changdao, the density of heaven and earth's spiritual energy was at most average. But when he walked into the courtyard and took a deep breath, he felt a little damp. He felt like he was bathing in the spring rain. Of course, this was just a figure of speech. It meant that the heaven and earth's spiritual energy in the courtyard was so thick that it almost condensed into raindrops. For cultivators, even if they were at the ruler realm, staying in this kind of environment for a long time would be greatly beneficial to their cultivation. Most importantly, the process of gathering spiritual energy was silent. It didn't have the shocking momentum of a spirit gathering array. As the saying goes, the water is deep and the water is silent. The more subtle a method was, the more it showed off one's background. It was no wonder that the flowing light tile was so expensive and was still popular in the desolate region. Bang! With a heavy kick, Baiji was sent flying backwards. She spat out a mouthful of blood and her face paled. Meaty's eyes were icy cold. "You really are an idiot. Do you know who Min Changjing and the old chef are? It's true that they don't dare to touch me, but they aren't people that a lowly maid like you has the qualifications to threaten." Baiji struggled to get up and kneel. "Madam, I just feel that—" Before she could finish, she was interrupted by a slap. "I don't want you to feel that. Moreover, who do you think you are? Do you think you have the qualifications to express yourself in front of me?" Meaty sneered. "Believe it or not, if I leave here, you won't live past tonight. You will be cooked and served on the table. If you don't even have this little bit of eyesight, what use do you have for these eyes? You might as well dig them out and step on them twice to hear the sound." Baiji shivered. She could clearly feel the madam's anger. She clenched her teeth and took a deep breath. Then she lifted her hand to dig out the eyeball. Bang! Another kick sent her flying out the door. "You brainless fool, I want to hear the sound. Do you think I don't know how to do it myself? Do I need you to dig it out yourself? Scram back to your room. For the next few days, without my orders, you are not allowed to take a single step out. Otherwise, I will really leave you here and let you experience what it means to be in purgatory on earth." "Yes." Baiji respectfully bowed and limped away. Meaty's face was dark and gloomy. Her mood was as bad as ever. Baiji's stupidity wasn't the main reason. It was because she had run into the muzzle of the spear that she had become today's punching bag. "Min Changjing, humph humph, you old thing, you actually dared to bare your teeth at me, and you even brought along such a helper. Humph 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 humph. Do you really think that my teeth have all fallen off and I can't bite you too, bastards?" If it weren't for her being by Qin Yu's side, then according to Meaty's temperament, she would have flipped out on the spot. In the imperial capital, that idiot in the Thunder Pond and now Min Changjing and the old chef had caused Meaty to feel the disparity between them. It could be imagined how bad her mood was. If this were in the past, she would have had 100 times more courage. She gloomily thought for a moment. Then she looked up and saw Baiji spitting out a mouthful of blood on the ground. She coldly sneered. "What? Do you want to try and see how much my power has declined? Fine. I will eat up that stupid woman today. Let's see what you can do about it." From the bloodstain on the ground, light surged and a faint figure appeared. He bowed and said, "Mang Shan greets you." After a brief pause, he fell to his knees and bowed in the proper manner of the barbarians. "Mang Shan came here today to thank you. You didn't hesitate to consume your own source energy to save the sovereign of my barbarian race. The barbarians will forever remember this kindness and will never forget it in the slightest." Meaty had no expression. "Speak less nonsense. I didn't save him because I wanted to owe you barbarians a favor. If you have anything concrete, then hurry up and take it out." Chapter 1639. Today, the great shaman of Meng Mountain had borrowed Baiji's blood to descend here. He didn't know whether it was because of his honest nature or because he sensed that little Meaty was in a bad mood, but he didn't hesitate. He reached into his chest and pulled out a beating heart. Of course, this heart wasn't his. In this world, there was no strange existence that would kill themselves to thank others. But it was also the heart of a great shaman. Only like this could it still keep beating and contain such a formidable strength after being taken out for so many years. This heart came from a great shaman of my barbarian race who died on the sea. If necessary, you can swallow it and burn this great shaman's heart. It should be enough for you to restore your peak strength in a short period of time without needing to worry that it will cause you too much damage. The great shaman of Mang Mountain respectfully said, "Compared to your great kindness, the reward of my barbarian race today is insignificant. Please don't be angry." Little Meaty reached out and the great shaman's heart fell into her hand. Her eyes brightened and she subconsciously licked her lips. She turned her hand away and said, "Don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. Aren't you just worried that something will happen to your barbarian sovereign? You gave me this great shaman's heart so that I can better protect your barbarian sovereign." The great shaman of Mang Mountain bowed. "Your eyes are like torches. My humble thoughts cannot be hidden from you." He took a deep breath. "I will have to trouble you with my barbarian sovereign." Little Meaty coldly sneered. "There is no need to flatter me. I accepted it because I wanted to, and it has nothing to do with you." He paused for a moment and said, "Since you've come, why don't you meet me?" The great shaman of Meng Mountain was a bit tempted. He hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "It's better not to meet me. Otherwise, I might draw out my aura and cause trouble for His Majesty." "You're quite thoughtful." Little Meaty looked at him. "Is there anything else?" The great shaman of Mang Mountain said, "Yes. The first matter is about His Majesty's incense, flame, Great Tao. Since your Majesty has already stepped onto it, I can secretly make arrangements to collect incense for your Majesty. This will be of some help to your Majesty's cultivation." Little Meaty shook her head. "No, at least not now. He cannot be tainted by the power of the Goliath Joss flames. Otherwise his identity will be exposed." She looked at him with a deep gaze. "You underestimate that building in Middle Wasteland, even if it's just an empty frame. Don't forget that there's a white jade capital above it. The Berserker's kismet has always been dissipating. They might not be able to sense it for a while, but if the incense sticks show any abnormal movements, they will definitely be locked onto." The grand shaman of Mang Mountains felt his heart tremble. He took a deep breath and cupped his fists. "You are right. I was too careless. I'll temporarily collect the joss sticks of my clan, and I'll give them to His Majesty when the time is right. The second matter is that there was a great shaman who committed a great crime in the early years of the barbarian tribe and was identified as a rebel. After the trial, his identity was taken away by the shaman ancestral court, and his whereabouts are unknown." When he said this, a bitter smile appeared on the great shaman of Mang Mountain's face. But now reality has proven that he was not wrong. Instead, it was those seniors of the shaman tribe who committed a grave mistake. Not long ago, this great shaman who lost his identity suddenly sent me a message saying that he wanted to return to the shaman ancestral court and take back his identity that was taken away from him. Little Meaty's lips curled up in a mocking smile. Those old fellows of the shaman ancestral court aren't willing to lower their heads and admit their mistakes? That's right. Those people are old and smelly to begin with, and their mouths are very tight. Making them lower their heads is even more uncomfortable than killing them. The great shaman of Mang Mountain's heart chilled. He discovered that this mysterious person in front of him had a very deep understanding of the barbarian tribe. The meaning behind her seemingly ordinary words was enough to make one think deeply. Little Meaty glanced at him, and the smile on her lips became even wider. Many years ago, I ate a great shaman of the barbarian tribe. He made a deal with me, but after that, he went back on his word. How could there be such a thing in this world? So, I do know quite a bit about the barbarian tribe. The great shaman of Mang Mountain's expression changed. He believed that Little Meaty was not lying. His thoughts raced, and he soon found the ancient records of the barbarian tribe. It was about a certain great shaman who had suddenly died without any warning. The so-called sudden death was just a story told to the outside world. The truth was that the great shaman had suddenly disappeared, and he was in his own secret training room. After he disappeared, the barbarian tribe investigated and collected evidence. They found some faint traces in the great shaman's personal notes. It seemed that many years ago, this great shaman had once made a deal with an extremely ancient and mysterious existence in this world in order to make a breakthrough. This matter involved the dignity of a great shaman of the barbarian tribe. In fact, it was highly likely that it would cause some sort of instability within the barbarian tribe. After all, the realm of the great shaman was far beyond their reach. If they made a deal with some existence, they might be able to make a breakthrough. Even if they knew that there would be endless troubles in the future, there would still be many barbarians who were stuck where they were, unable to make a breakthrough, and would be willing to take the risk. This matter had been sealed as a top secret, and it had never been unsealed until now. Only the great shaman of the barbarian tribe had the qualifications to read its contents, and they also needed to swear an oath with the barbarian tribe's bloodline that they would never attempt to make a deal with this mysterious existence. Little Meaty picked up her teacup and casually drank 2 mouthfuls. She ignored the great shaman of Mang Mountain, whose face was filled with uncertainty. Her eyes were calm. Who? The great shaman of Mang Mountain let out a long breath. He bowed and said, since it was a violation of the deal, it is only right that he pay the price. He hesitated for a moment and then bitterly smiled. But regarding this matter, I ask that you do not tell the other barbarians, lest something unexpected happen. Little Meaty's eyebrows arched up. His bloodline still has descendants. The great shaman of Mang Mountain took a deep breath and said in a low voice, right now, the great shaman who controls the barbarian ancestral court is a direct descendant of his bloodline. He has been secretly investigating the mysterious disappearance of the great shaman. Little Meaty licked her lips. Is that so? Then that is a pleasant surprise. She waved her hand. Go back and tell that unlucky fellow that I have agreed to help him make a trip to the ancestral court in the future. The great shaman of Mang Mountain forced a smile. My lady, I am a bit regretful that I told you about this matter. Little Meaty had no expression. It's too late. She vaguely remembered that they had signed a bloodline contract in the past. In other words, the descendants of his bloodline were all her slaves. This was like a radish that had suddenly sprouted from her own vegetable field. What a pleasant surprise! The great shaman of Mang Mountain's forced smile deepened. As he looked at Little Meaty's face, he thought that His Majesty the barbarian sovereign wouldn't just stand idly by and watch as this person acted recklessly, right? After all, this was the barbarian ancestral court. If something were to happen, It would surely cause a great uproar. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands together. My lady, Mang Mountain bids farewell. Little Meaty arched an eyebrow. You're leaving just like that? Why don't you think about it carefully? Is there anything else you haven't said? The great shaman of Mang Mountain shook his head. Baiji is now your maid. Whether she lives or dies will depend on your will. I will not interfere. Shwa! His figure vanished from sight. Little Meaty looked at the place where the great shaman of Mang Mountain had disappeared and rubbed her temples. This was a person who knew when to advance and when to retreat, and knew how to act appropriately. If he dared to make a request just because he gave her the heart of a great shaman and flattered her a few words, she would definitely agree. But as for how she would do it, that would depend on her mood. This woman Baiji was a bit stupid, but her life wasn't bad. Then she would stay here for a bit longer. Little Meaty looked up at the void in front of her and sneered. Old Master Min wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. He stood up and cupped his hands in apology. When he sat down, he looked aggrieved. This is my home. How could you come and go as you please? Have you ever considered the feelings of your master? But the one who came just now was really strong. Well, of course, he was still weaker than me. But if he fought with old Chef, he would probably have a 50-50 chance of winning. Was it that madam who deliberately found a helper to put pressure on them? No, if that was the case, he shouldn't have come and gone in a hurry. He should have stayed for at least a few days, waiting for the dust to settle. Old Masterman scratched his head and took a sip of tea. As the cold tea entered his stomach, he felt even more irritated. He always felt that this madam's actions were too strange, and he couldn't figure out her depth. For example, Go Shing, the third-generation disciple of the Li family who thought he was a dog. She was the one who sent him here, but after he arrived, she didn't care. Did she not care at all, or did she think that old Masterman would not dare to act recklessly? No matter how angry she was, she had to pinch her nose and accept it? No matter how he thought about it, he felt that the latter was more likely. This made old Masterman's mood even worse. Qin Yu was cultivating. After returning to his residence, he could feel the rich heaven and earth spiritual energy that had condensed into water droplets. His eyes brightened, and he didn't want to waste any time. As for other matters, he didn't know why he had to come to this mysterious and unfathomable residence. Just leave it to Little Meaty. 30 years passed in the blink of an eye, and he had to work hard every day. The only exception was when the great shaman of Mang Mountain arrived. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred, and he faintly sensed something. He confirmed that the source of that feeling came from Little Meaty's residence. After thinking about it, he pretended that he hadn't discovered anything. He now believed in Little Meaty, and since he believed in her, there was no need for him to doubt her. So, since Little Meaty didn't say anything, that meant that he didn't need to appear. He continued to cultivate. Drifting Fire Tribe. Many days had passed since the death of the barbarian sovereign, but life was still going on as usual. There was no change. The fear in everyone's hearts dissipated a little. They thought that even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone taller to hold it up. Drifting Fire Tribe gradually regained its stability. As a matter of fact, after successfully selling that high-quality stone, the Chu Heavenly Clan's clan chief was so happy that he married another woman to him. Today, they were holding a wedding. The old barbarian hadn't been in a good mood recently, so he didn't want to participate. He listlessly leaned against a stone, wearing a tattered robe. His back was hunched, and he looked drowsy. As he heard several boys angrily discussing this matter, he opened his eyes and waved them away. Go do what you need to do. What are you all talking about? If you aren't convinced, then go find the tribe leader and scold him. I'll give him a thumbs up. The several young barbarians immediately withered. One of the boys bitterly smiled and said, Uncle, please don't mock us. How could we possibly provoke the tribe leader? He clenched his teeth and pointed a finger. We are the ones who aren't convinced. Who in the tribe doesn't know that Aya and him are on good terms? Aya's parents said that they were willing to give Amu 5 years. As long as they could take out a betrothal gift, they would marry the girl to him. But the tribe leader wanted to marry a concubine, and he insisted on choosing Aya. Her parents didn't dare to resist, but Amu went to cause trouble and was beaten by the tribe leader's guards. Bah! What bullshit guards! He is the brother-in-law of the tribe leader's wife. He is helping his brother-in-law find a concubine. He is a scoundrel with ulcers on his head and pus on the soles of his feet. In the past, he pestered Aya and was taught a lesson by us. I think this matter was most likely instigated by this scoundrel. Everyone was filled with anger. The boy named Amu had a swollen face and a bloody nose. He stared at the ground without speaking. The old barbarian frowned. His eyes fell on Amu. "Do you think this is true?" Amu looked up, his eyes red. "Uncle, Aya will be brought back to the tent by the tribe leader tonight. I want to go save her." As he finished speaking, he fell to his knees. "If I go, I won't be able to return. My parents are still in the tribe, and I want to ask you to take care of them." The reason why these young barbarians liked to surround the old barbarian was because his luck was good and he could always make a small fortune. That stone from last year was proof. Secondly, the old barbarian really knew a lot and they could gain a lot of knowledge by following him. Thirdly, he had a special status in the tribe. It was said that the old barbarian was not a member of the tribe. Back then, he had fainted in the wilderness. When he was picked up, he looked like this. Even now, the tribe leader treated him with respect. The old barbarian frowned. "Is it worth it?" Amu nodded. "I promised Aya that I would marry her, so I won't let her suffer. Otherwise, I will live the rest of my life sullenly. I might as well die like this." The old barbarian muttered, "As long as you don't live sullenly, you aren't afraid of death." Amu clenched his teeth. "I'm not afraid." "Then go." The old barbarian thought for a moment and took out a knife from his chest. He usually used this knife to cut meat and eat. It was sloppy and had a layer of grease on it. "For you, use it tonight." Amu took it with both hands and kowtowed. At night, the wedding turned into a funeral. The tribe leader was beheaded by Amu. 2 elders close to the tribe leader attacked in anger and became ghosts under the knife. Then, everyone became quiet. They stared at the knife in Amu's hand with wide eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. Even Amu himself. The totem fire spirit of the flowing fire tribe appeared and directly announced to the tribe that Amu had become the new tribe leader of the flowing fire tribe. And tonight was the tribe leader's wedding. Amu, who had become the tribe leader without even knowing it, brought his new wife Aya to find the old barbarian on the second day. They didn't know when he had left. This made the group of young barbarians look at each other in dismay. Their eyes gradually showed respect. Amu pulled Aya to kneel on the ground and respectfully kowtowed towards the old barbarian's tent. And now, thousands of miles away, the old barbarian was silently hurrying on his way. Even a junior knew that it was better to die a glorious death than to live sullenly. Yet he couldn't see through it all these years. It was really laughable. He didn't know what was right or wrong before. But now that he was in the right, how could he continue sullenly? There was no such logic in the world. Today he had to go to the ancestral court and take back his identity. He had to let them announce to the entire barbarian world who was in the wrong in the past. The old barbarian knew that this matter was very difficult and might even be dangerous. But he wasn't afraid. This world was still reasonable, and his fists were almost fully grown. Chapter 1640. Little Meaty suddenly changed her mind. Of course, before she changed her mind, she first looked around to make sure that Chinyu was indeed in seclusion. Baiji was released and allowed to walk through the residence. Not just that, but she also took off her white robes and changed into a dress that accentuated her curves. When old man Min inadvertently saw Baiji on the cruise ship and Min Xiangtai talking and laughing with him, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning and nearly lost his composure. He turned to look for little Meaty and nearly fell to his knees. He sullenly said, "Madam, I will definitely help cure that subordinate of yours. But this matter is very troublesome, so you must give me some time. I only have a single son, and I can't afford to be tossed around like this. I ask that madam show mercy, and call back that young miss at your side." Little Meaty took a deep breath and then gently laid down the teacup, not revealing the slightest bit of anger. "If old man Min feels this is inappropriate, then you can personally kill that girl. There is no need to make a trip here." Old man Min rubbed his face. He really did want to do this, but unfortunately he didn't dare. Of course, he denied it again and again, wishing that he could swear on the spot that he wouldn't dare to show the least bit of disrespect to Madam. Little Meaty didn't believe a single word of these words, but they had already exchanged some words and had vaguely expressed their attitude. Now they could begin their proper business. She tapped the table and lightly said, "It's just a dog. It isn't worth my trouble. So what if it dies?" Min Changjing's lips twitched. He took a deep breath and said, "May I ask, madam, is there something else? If this old man can do it, I will absolutely not decline." Little Meaty lifted a hand and pointed to where Chinyu was in seclusion. Marquis Zhongwu obtained a lucky chance a few days ago and was able to see the gate of heaven and man ahead of time. But just because he can see it doesn't mean he can touch it. We need to open a path for him. Min Changjing furrowed his eyebrows. He fell silent. The air was quiet and peaceful. Little Meaty's lips curved up. "How is it? Old man Min has endured for so long, and now you don't plan on hiding any more?" She licked her lips, her eyes bright. Min Changjing forced a smile. "Madam, you speak too seriously. Even if this old man ate the courage of a leopard, I wouldn't dare to harbor any ill intentions towards you. It is just that this matter is extremely thorny. That's right. This old man admits that I can indeed do this. However, building a ladder for the great Tao of others will damage one's own cultivation. There is no such logic in this world." He looked up and looked at her. His tone was still respectful, but there was something different in his eyes. "I don't think Madam wants to tell the horse to run, but doesn't want to give it a single blade of grass, right?" The bottom line was something that could be said lightly, as if it could be said directly with just a touch of his lips. But in fact, it was very heavy. It was fine if he couldn't touch the bottom line, but if he really crossed it, he would have to change his face and attitude, regardless of whether he was willing or not. Now, Min Changjing had placed his bottom line in front of this madam. Whether she would take a step forward or take half a step back depended on her choice. Little Meaty's face was expressionless and her eyes were cold. "Lord Min, how bold of you." Min Changjing shook his head. "There's nothing I can do. After living for so many years, I can't become a marionette when I'm old. Otherwise, I'll be ashamed of my cultivation." Little Meaty sneered. She flipped her palm, and a beating heart appeared. Across from her, Min Changjing frowned. His face was slightly pale, but there was no cowardice in the depths of his eyes. Humph! It seemed like old Master Min was afraid after all. But it's a pity to waste this heart in this place. So let's make a deal. Min Changjing hurriedly nodded, his face full of smiles. "Good deal, good deal. Peace brings wealth." The corners of Little Meaty's mouth curved up. "So, you'd better think carefully before you make your offer. Otherwise, I might change my mind." Min Changjing cupped his hands respectfully. "Don't worry, madam. This old man doesn't want to die yet." Even though he said that, they still had to engage in a battle of words. Little Meaty almost turned hostile several times before they reluctantly reached an agreement. With a bitter face, Min Changjing left the courtyard covered with flowing tiles. Suddenly, he let out a long breath, a thoughtful look on his face. At some point, old Chef, whose legs had been broken, appeared beside him. He looked as if he was all ears. "That's it for now. Since this madam didn't go too far, we'll just endure it. There's no need to make a life and death decision." Old Chef nodded. "Master, you're right. These are wise and prudent words." Min Changjing gritted his teeth. Get lost. I'm in a bad mood now. Don't be an eyesore." Although the worst situation had not happened, he had still suffered a great loss. Moreover, he was in his own home. Being suppressed by an outsider, of course he wouldn't be happy. Old Chef turned and walked away without any hesitation. Only when Old Chef was angry would it mean that he was fine. If he looked calm on the surface, that would mean that something big was about to happen. "Come back. Weren't your legs broken? If you go back like this, the little girl will lose face." Min Changjing had a dangerous look in his eyes. Old Chef instantly disappeared without a trace. "Master, you don't have to worry about me. I naturally have a way to hide it from that little girl." As he ran, he looked a little wronged. He thought that he was really not a person who was good at hiding his inner emotions. Old Chef could see through his thoughts with one look. Just now, he really wanted to personally break his legs. Then it would really be broken. Alas, he didn't have many years to live. Why didn't Old Chef let him repay his kindness? He couldn't bring his skills with him after he died. It would be a pity to waste them like this. He might as well take a gamble. Although that madam was holding the heart of a great witch, if he directly abandoned his body, he might be able to seal her as well. He didn't need too much. As long as he could seal her for a while, it would be enough for Old Chef to take action and swallow her. When she fell into Old Chef's stomach, no matter how powerful she was, would she be able to escape? Then, at most, it would be a painstaking effort. At most, she would have an upset stomach for a few 100 years. Little by little, she would be digested. Perhaps it would be a great opportunity. He really couldn't figure it out. Old Chef was very distressed. But he was very clear about Old Chef's intention. Since he didn't agree to take action, he could only continue to endure. Qin Yu's seclusion was interrupted by Little Meaty. She bluntly told Qin Yu that she had made a deal with Min Changjing. He would help Qin Yu build a path to enter. It was because he knew which door Little Meaty was referring to that Qin Yu was even more startled. He quickly looked her up and down. After making sure there wasn't anything wrong with her, he was still a bit worried. Little Meaty rolled her eyes. "Don't worry, I didn't suffer a loss. At most, I paid a few things that didn't cost me anything." She paused for a moment, and then her lips curved up in a smile. "As for that old toad, he's going to vomit blood this time. Don't be polite and eat as much as you can." Qin Yu glanced at Little Meaty, hesitating to speak. "Enough. A man shouldn't be so straightforward. I just came to tell you something. Just wait." Little Meaty turned and walked away, a warm look in her eyes. Min Changjing was waiting outside the courtyard. As he saw Little Meaty come out, he bitterly smiled. "When the madam is speaking, she always avoids me a bit. This old man has been listening outside. It's really a strange feeling." Little Meaty glanced at him. She lightly said, "You must keep your word. I will personally go and bring Baiji back. I can also chat with this young sir of yours while I'm at it." Min Changjing's complexion stiffened. He watched her leave and gnashed his teeth in hatred. But he could only squeeze out a smile and push open the door to the courtyard. "Marquis, did the madam explain things clearly to you? If there isn't anything else, how about we begin now?" Qin Yu smiled and cupped his hands together. "It's no trouble at all. To be able to cooperate with the madam is this old man's good fortune." Min Changjing coughed and lowered his voice, a bitter expression on his face. "It's just that this cooperation is far too much of a loss. To build a path for Marquis, what this old man painstakingly cultivated day and night is my cultivation. So, I ask that Marquis be magnanimous and don't allow this old man's foundation to be damaged." Qin Yu nodded. "Lord Min, rest assured. You have helped me so much. So how could Ning Qin not be grateful? I know what I am doing." "Who was Ning Qin?" "In any case, I wasn't." Min Changjing's face was filled with gratitude. He sighed with emotion and thanked Qin Yu again. Then he gestured with his hand. "Marquis, I ask that you sit down cross-legged and focus your attention on that door. Afterwards, this old man will help you build a path to enter. You only need to maintain this entire process, and immediately lock onto that door. There is no need to worry about anything else. Qin Yu cupped his hands together in thanks once more. Then he sat down cross-legged and focused his mind. Suddenly, that shining golden door appeared in front of him. Min Changjing walked in front of Qin Yu. He lifted a finger and placed it between his eyebrows. After sensing it, his complexion changed and he revealed a bitter expression. It seemed that this marquis's cultivation talent wasn't too great. This door was high and high, nearly reaching the edge of the heavens. If no one opened a path for him, then even if he obtained a heaven-defying lucky chance or good fortune and saw this door ahead of time, he feared he would never have the chance to step through it in his life. Bitter, bitter. The higher the door, the longer the road, the more cultivation he would have to consume. He originally thought that this wasn't too much of a loss for him, but looking at it now, it seemed that he had suffered a great loss. Min Changjing hesitated for a moment, but that was all. The transaction had already been completed. If he went back on his word now, he wouldn't have the slightest bit of reason. Once that madam flipped out, she wouldn't have any scruples at all. At that time, he might not be able to protect his son, and he might not be able to escape unscathed. After all, he had personally seen that great shaman's heart that came from who knew where. There was a great deal of strength contained within. There was no way he could lie about it. Min Changjing clenched his teeth. Suddenly, golden veins appeared on his palm, like the roots of a great tree that sank into the ground. They gathered at his fingertip. Then his fingertip turned a dazzling gold. Faint traces of golden aura poured into the point between Qin Yu's eyebrows. To cultivate the road of the great Tao, what one consumed was the power of the great Tao. Every trace of this golden aura was Min Changjing's cultivation, not to mention anything else. But as long as there was a monster in the world, if one could obtain even a trace of it, that would be a great stroke of good fortune. Even ordinary beasts, if they could swallow it into their stomachs and their bellies didn't burst open, they would be able to develop their spiritual wisdom and naturally understand the cultivation of the monster race. This was truly a supreme treasure in the eyes of monsters. The Thousand Islands County was originally a large lake, and this lake was tens of thousands of miles wide. The waters were deep, and there were countless monsters living in the water. Normally, due to fear of the rule of the Western Wasteland Empire, these monsters didn't dare to act recklessly. They lived in harmony with these islands and cultivated underwater. But today, each and every one of them seemed to have lost their minds. They displayed the ability to overturn rivers and seas as they rushed over from all directions. Within the Thousand Islands County, countless island masters of all sizes widened their eyes in horror. Then, they discovered that the goal of these crazed monsters in the water wasn't them at all. Rather, they rode the waves and soared toward some place. Looking at that place, it seemed that it was Changdao, which had suddenly gained a master several years ago. For a time, countless eyes gathered on it. All of them had different thoughts, but they gradually revealed a bit of heat. As the saying goes, there is no wind in a cave. There must be a reason for the unusual movements. It must be a great opportunity that could make the thousands of monsters in the lake suddenly go crazy. Could it be that a treasure was going to appear in Changdao? Outside the crowd of monsters, there were some figures hiding in the stormy waves, quietly moving towards Changdao. Ahem, after all, we are all neighbors connected by the same river. As the saying goes, a close neighbor is better than a distant relative. Now that our neighbor is besieged by thousands of monsters, how can we, the good neighbors of the Western Wasteland, just sit back and watch? That's right. Chapter 1641. Old Chef's figure quietly appeared at the pier of Changdao. He took a look at the surging lake and sighed, thinking that this was really a case of not taking the road to heaven, but going to hell when there was no door. But in this world, whether it was a human or a demon, they all had to pay for their own choices. This was the so-called everything has its own destiny. Besides, he didn't have much time left, and he might not even have a chance in his next life. Why should he worry about getting involved in this? Besides, he didn't make the first move. At most, he was just trying to protect himself. Old Master Heavenly Axiom saw it clearly, so he couldn't put all the blame on him. Old Chef turned his hand and took out a golden talisman. The lines on it were messy, not beautiful at all, like a child's doodle. But the moment the talisman appeared, in the deep lake around Changdao, those anxious water demons who wanted to rush up and start a massacre suddenly felt terrified. The raging waves calmed down for a moment, and then the big demons in the deep lake turned around and ran out desperately. The burning greed in their instincts couldn't fight against the fear in their hearts. They only felt that Changdao in front of them was an open mouth, waiting for them to take the initiative to come to it. However, it was too late to escape now. The golden talisman in Old Chef's hand burned to ashes in an instant. Those messy lines that looked like graffiti became golden, as if they had come to life. They whizzed into the lake. They moved faster than lightning. In the blink of an eye, the water within 100 miles around Changdao turned into a cage. All water-kind spirit creatures who broke into the golden cage were locked inside. No matter how hard they tried to break the cage, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't shake the golden cage, not even a little bit. Even further away, ferocious waves were still crashing towards them. Hidden beneath each wave was a water monster from the lake. The water within 100 miles had turned into a cage, but they didn't seem to notice it and just ran into it. Seeing this, the good neighbors of the islands, who were hiding in the dark, all widened their eyes in horror. The demon-trapping formation in Changdao could not only hide, but also allowed people to enter but not get out. It seemed like it was going to swallow all the water demons in the lake, which was really shocking. Such extravagance, and might caused even some people that felt they were experienced and knowledgeable to be extremely astounded in their hearts, and their eyes instantly revealed reverence. Of course, he wanted to continue approaching, but he didn't dare to do so. However, he was also unwilling to turn around and leave just like that, because the movement and the preparation in Changdao were premeditated no matter how he looked at it. It cost a lot and involved a lot of things. The Thousand Islands County was also known as the River of Islands. It had a circumference of several tens of thousands of miles. The water in the lake was strong and pure. It bred tens of thousands of monsters, definitely more than the number of islands. It seemed that the commotion today was not limited to a radius of 3,000 or 5,000 miles. Perhaps more than half of the Thousand Islands County had been alarmed. A demon-trapping formation, no matter how high its grade or how powerful it was, could it really trap tens of thousands of demons? Just like those big eaters. They might be fine for a while, but after eating and drinking for a day and a half, their stomach will burst. At that time, wouldn't there be a chance? Of course, it's not too much for us to stay here and not get close to Changdao. As a good neighbor, we can watch from afar and wait for help. After all, it's our duty to help each other as good neighbors. In Min Xiangtai's yard, the young master who had fallen in love only had Baiji in his eyes. He didn't care about what was happening outside of Changdao. He had no idea what was happening outside of Changdao. Little Meaty sat on the ridge of the roof. The highest grade of flowing light cities, flowing light tiles, had fallen below her buttocks. Right now, it had also become dim and lusterless. The wisps of spiritual chi that had gathered here had been completely devoured. At this moment, she glanced at the direction of the dock, raised her eyebrows, and showed a cold smile. This old chef was giving her warning, and he was a loyal protector of his master. However, this demon-subduing method was really powerful. If she risked her life, it would be a bit troublesome. Otherwise, after Little Meaty left Changdao, she wouldn't mind sneaking back one day and swallowing this old bastard, which would make up for her loss. She raised her hand and took a sip of the wine fruit. Little Meaty sprayed out a bit of the smell of wine. She said blandly, "Get out." Min Xiangtai, who was in the room, didn't notice her at all. Baiji's body stiffened, and then she smiled like a flower. By the time the word left the island and came to a stop in the air above the 50-kilometer demon-trapping formation, It was like a thunderclap rumbling in the ears of the neighbors, causing their faces to turn ashen and their bodies to totter on the verge of collapse. What bulsh asterisk T schemes? What bulsh asterisk T neighbors helping each other? They'd better run away and save their lives first. Changdao couldn't afford to mess with them. Not to mention the demon-trapping formation. There was a grandmaster on the island. As for how powerful the grandmaster was, they didn't know. But one thing was for sure. If he wanted to kill them, he just needed to move his mouth a few times. After shouting away the shadows outside the island, with the old chef's help, the water demons in the lake wouldn't be able to do anything. No matter how many came, they would all die. Little Meaty took another sip, and her eyes fell on the place where Qin Yu was cultivating in seclusion. It had begun. She curled up the corner of her mouth and gloated. She pushed the door of Qin Yu a little far away, and the old toad was going to suffer a big loss this time. Min Chang Jing gritted his teeth. His face was so gloomy that it looked like it was about to drip water. Opening a path to heaven was difficult, not to mention that it would consume one's own cultivation. Helping an outsider open a path was even more difficult. In this world, even his own father wouldn't do such a thing. But now his only son was in front of that madam, and he didn't even know that he was outside the gates of hell. If he made a mistake, he would immediately die on the spot. No matter how angry he was, he could only endure it. After all, he only had one child in his family, the only one who could inherit his bloodline. But even so, he felt as if a hole had been dug in his hard-earned cultivation, and it was crazily leaking out. Min Chanjing felt so uncomfortable that his heart was bleeding. Looking back, this was the first time he had suffered such a great loss in the tens of thousands of years of his life. But now, Qin Yu's entire mind was focused on one point, and he had completely cut off his perception of the outside world. Of course, he didn't know that Min Changjing was gritting his teeth in anger. He saw a golden path extending from beneath his feet, all the way up to the golden door in the sky. This was a mysterious and wondrous feeling. Qin Yu could clearly feel that as the great Tao beneath his feet spread upwards, his connection with the world became increasingly close. It was as if he were one with the heavens and earth, becoming an incarnation of it. Simply put, he had turned himself into a part of the heaven and earth net, and used this to counteract the suppression of the heaven and earth net. In a daze, Qin Yu came to some understanding. No wonder those who had reached the peak of the Emperor realm were still able to live free and unfettered lives. They weren't crushed by the heaven and earth net until they bled from their noses and mouths. This must be the reason. Just as Qin Yu was immersed in this, far away in the heaven-pulling sect, Qin Yu, who was cultivating in seclusion, felt his heart throbbing. His eyes widened in shock and astonishment. Then he smiled bitterly. Between the two of us, who was born of heaven and earth, such a thing could actually happen. As expected, there was a reason why the master was the master. After thinking for a while, the white-robed Qin Yu smiled. He closed his eyes, and with a thought, his aura instantly disappeared. All that was left was a body that had lost all of its essence, qi and spirit. Since that madam wants me to help, then I'll help her. The path to heaven is known as the 9 bends. Only when the bends lead to seclusion can one enjoy the blessings of heaven and earth and walk a true path to heaven. But since it's called the 9 bends, it's naturally winding, and one has to walk a lot more than others. In this world, there aren't many people who can really walk it. If Master can walk the 9 bends and open up the path to heaven, his future cultivation will naturally be unimpeded, and his achievements will be shocking. I'm wholeheartedly thinking for Master, without the slightest bit of selfishness. But if the person who helps Master open up the path to heaven isn't strong enough, or if he goes back on his words halfway and causes the path to heaven to become a dead end, then it's Master's own bad luck. It has nothing to do with me. Long Island, on the ridge of Min Xiangtai's house, a meaty eyebrow arched up and a mocking smile appeared on his lips. Little thing, you want to play mind games with me? You're far too naive. If it weren't for the sake of opening up a true path to heaven for Chinyu, would I have been dawdling here until now? She lifted a hand and pointed. Min Xiangtai, who had been speaking eloquently with a happy smile on his face, suddenly slumped down on the table and fell into a deep sleep. Across from him, Baiji, who had been smiling like a flower a moment ago, immediately restrained her expression. She stood up and respectfully bowed. Madam. Baiji appeared across from her, her expression light. You've done well. You've made up for a bit of your previous foolishness. She lifted a hand and Min Xiangtai fell into it. Little Meaty turned her head and looked into the courtyard. There was a room with a tightly shut door. Little girl, I know you're hiding inside, but you'd better not move around. Otherwise, if my hand shakes, you really will die. At that time, you will be a pitiful little widow. With a creaking sound, the door was pushed open. A maid with a large whip in her hair walked out with a helpless expression. She respectfully bowed. Madam, please show mercy. Don't hurt the young master. I really don't want to be a widow. Little Meaty looked her up and down. Suddenly, her lips curved up. I almost made a mistake. Your Long Island is really interesting. The maid smiled. Madam, please keep this a secret. I haven't married yet. Little Meaty nodded. Of course. I also don't like that old toad. He actually dared to bargain with me. She picked up the unconscious Min Xiangtai and turned to leave. Her figure flickered and she vanished from sight. The maid stood up and wiped the cold sweat from her forehead. As she looked at the place where the madam had left, her face paled. She finally understood why the old master and her father had joined hands and still hadn't dared to act rashly. This madam was too terrifying. Chapter 1642. The big girl let out a breath and looked up at Baiji. She suddenly said, I finally know why Madam called you stupid. It's because you really are stupid. I advise you not to move. I'm afraid that if I can't hold back and kill you, I'll get into trouble. Baiji smiled. When you were hiding in the room and saw me and Min Xiangtai whispering to each other, didn't you feel uncomfortable? The big girl frowned and turned to leave. I'm afraid of you. I don't want to die with you. That would be too much of a loss. She wasn't fast, but her figure was far away in an instant. Her aura fluctuated so that Baiji couldn't lock onto her with the sword on her back. Her face paled. Gritting her teeth, Baiji turned around and left. Her long dress was torn to shreds and fell to the ground. Before her naked body could come into contact with the air, she was covered by a white robe. She returned to her previous appearance, revealing only her eyes. Min Changjing's complexion could be said to be pale and his heart filled with anger. He had no choice but to suppress it. But when he felt Qin Yu's road to the heavens suddenly turn, it was as if a bolt of lightning had struck him, nearly causing him to explode on the spot. What was the meaning of this? A straight road wasn't enough and he had to go around in circles? Did he really not care about other people's cultivation? Thinking about how Qin Yu nodded without hesitation when he tried to persuade him, Min Changjing wished he could slap this little bastard in front of him and smash him to pieces. This deal wasn't going to happen. The angry old masterman was about to take back his hand. As for Qin Yu's road to heaven, if it became a dead end, then that was his own fault. If he wanted to blame someone, he should blame the madam who broke her promise. If you dare to stop, he will be the first to die. Little Meaty appeared out of thin air, holding Min Xiangtai in her hand. Her face was expressionless and her eyes were cold. Min Changjing was so angry that he laughed. Madam, you broke your promise first. Do you really think I don't dare to risk my life? Rumble! Black clouds appeared in the skies above Changdao. They instantly piled up like a floating mountain, sprinkling down endless pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. This scene caused countless cultivators who fled Changdao to subconsciously widen their eyes. They began to sweat profusely and then rejoice. Another one came. What kind of place was Changdao? Big shots came one after another. It was fortunate that he had escaped in time. Otherwise, if he had fallen beneath the black clouds, he would have been squashed into a meat patty. But who could tell them what had happened in Changdao? Why was there such a huge commotion? The sound of something tearing through the air whistled out, and it was actually a large ship that tore through the waves. Its speed was swift like a bolt of lightning as it pierced through the turbulent waves all along the way. And it actually didn't stop at all. County Governor. The cultivators of the various islands cupped their fists respectfully. It couldn't be helped. Right now, the world was ruled by the Western Wasteland Empire. Everyone on and off the mountain had to be afraid of the Western Wasteland Empire. No one dared to go against them. Otherwise, with just a single order, the Western Wasteland Empire's army would move out and form a formation to surround and kill them. It didn't matter if they were a great sect that had existed for thousands of years or a rebellious evil cultivator. They would all be killed. Similar things had happened many times in the past, and it was enough for the current cultivators to clearly see who had the biggest fist in the world. Swish! The wave-breaking flying ship stopped, and several figures flew out from it. The one in the middle looked dignified. Looking at the scene in front of him, he just frowned and looked gloomy, but he wasn't afraid at all. As the county governor of Thousand Islands Commandery, he patrolled the area on behalf of the emperor. He represented the face of the Western Wasteland Empire. Who dared to mess with him? However, the commotion in Changdao was too big, so the county governor stopped halfway to ask. Otherwise, he would have ordered people to rush to the island and order the madman, who had disrupted the water transportation and caused such a big commotion, to surrender and wait for punishment. What on earth happened here? The county governor asked. If they could tell him one or two things, then they would have a little favor. In the future, as long as they didn't go too far, they would definitely get some benefits. But now, the people present looked at each other and scratched their cheeks anxiously, but no one could tell the slightest inside information. Unless the county governor was tired of living, no one dared to speak carelessly. Otherwise, it wouldn't be trying to make connections, but seeking death. The county governor's face darkened and his thoughts raced. This was a bit unexpected. The island cultivators of Thousand Islands Commandery had always been well informed, but they actually didn't know the inside story of such a big commotion. And Changdao happened to be a territory that he had personally sold for a sum of money a few years ago. Although most of it was handed over to the national treasury, the part that was kept made the county governor happy for a few days. But who would have thought that the big fortune that he had gotten would now become a hot potato? The county governor glanced at the commotion in Changdao, gritted his teeth, and was about to send an order to mobilize the garrison in the commandery city. Otherwise, if things continued like this, once something big happened, he would be the first to get into trouble. But at this moment, the county governor frowned slightly. He flipped his hand and took out the official seal. As he probed it with his divine consciousness, his face suddenly changed. When he looked in the direction of Changdao, he subconsciously showed deep awe. Taking a deep breath, the county governor's eyes flashed like lightning as he coldly swept over everyone. From this day forth, the area within 1,000 miles of Changdao is a restricted area designated by the imperial court. No one is allowed to peep in or take half a step inside. Otherwise, the laws of the nation will be ruthless. Everyone's hearts shook. They didn't dare to stay any longer. They all found excuses and fled far away. No wonder there was such a commotion. So it was related to the Western Wasteland's imperial court. Could it be that the imperial court's masters were here to kill the villains on the blood list? The county governor glanced at Changdao from afar. Let's retreat another few hundred miles. The flying boat held away, not daring to stay any longer. And at this time in Qin Yu's seclusion chamber, little Meaty looked up at the sky. Her sneer deepened. Do you think I would be afraid? Min Changjing lightly said, Madam, you might not be afraid, but if you really do fight, it's hard to say what the result will be. Min Xiangtai will die. Marquis Zhongwu will also die. Little Meaty narrowed her eyes. Then let's give it a try. She exerted a bit of force with her fingers. Min Xiangtai's neck suddenly emitted cracking sounds, and cracks began to appear. Faint traces of golden light began to emit from within. Blue veins popped up on Min Changjing's forehead. The golden light on his fingertips brightened, and the faint traces of Tao that flowed into Qin Yu's body rose 10 times over. It was like a mountain stream that suddenly swelled into a river, one that could wash away the stone embankments on both sides at any moment. Little Meaty sneered. She opened her mouth and swallowed. From the cracks on Min Xiangtai's neck, golden light surged out. Stop! Min Changjing shouted out loud, his face twisted. Madam, there is no such reasoning in this world. Do you really want to force me to die together with you? Little Meaty closed her mouth, allowing the golden light to float around her nose and mouth. If you were any slower, I really would have eaten him. Min Changjing clenched his teeth, not speaking. He knew that as long as he spoke, he would lose this life gambling game. But he didn't dare to gamble. For so many years, he only had this one son. If he were to be killed, what future would he have in the future? Little Meaty faintly smiled. Now we can rediscuss the contents of this transaction.